It's 7:30, but we don't have the mayor or the city manager here at the moment, so we'll give them a minute or two, and if they have been held up, we'll get started without them in a couple minutes. Thanks for bearing with us.
Yeah, we got the mayor.
Held up outside.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? Good. Well, welcome to the Monday, October 20th City Council work session. Thank you to our guests for joining us. I think we have a few members of the CACT in the audience. Actually, I would actually invite, if we can find room at the table, I'd love for them to actually join us at the table as well, since we'd invited you as a joint work session, so I don't ever want you to feel like you have to be in the audience. So let's make room. Yeah, we'll scooch. Welcome back, Dave.
Certainly, Mayor. Ms. Connolly? Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Ms. Downs?
Here.
Ms. Flynn?
Here.
Ms. Siscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Ms. Underhill?
Here.
Mayor Hardy?
Here.
Thank you, council.
Do we need to call roll for the CACT if it was advertised as a joint session?
Yes, thank you. I have the list. Chair Egan? Here. Vice Chair Whitaker? Here. Ms. Hagenbart? There you are. Thought I'd seen you. Ms. Myers?
She's not here.
And Ms. Tristan Southhart?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Badeau?
Here, thank you.
And Mark Cloutier?
Not here.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, let's get started. I know we have two topics that are probably of interest to the CACT, so thank you for making time on a Monday night to join us. Wyatt, you want to kick it off?
Well, sure. Good evening, members of council, members of the CACT. I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Brain, who's going to walk us through the presentation tonight. But we're also joined by Tahir Benabdi, this is, I think, maybe his first city council meeting. So welcome. He's our city engineer and recently joined the city now 2 months ago. Yeah. So it's great having him on the team, and Tara Puzin is here as well. We want to talk about both Vision Zero, and we have want to just give a sort of an update on staff's work in this space. The City Council's one of its top strategic priorities is to address transportation in the city, and we do that working with community, bringing expertise and community input to arrive at solutions. And we have a lot going on in the city right now. So we want to talk about how these principles inform all of the design and implementation that we're doing. We also have Jenna Brummond, who is here. She's our staff liaison to the CACT and does a great job working with the community on citizen-initiated requests for safety improvements. So Amanda, let me turn it over to you. I know we've got some slides to go through, and then after that, look forward to a discussion. We will tie both the Vision Zero and the Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan together, so we can talk about these two kind of holistically or together, and ultimately the request tonight is to schedule these for action by the City Council at your upcoming regular meeting on October 27th.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Wyatt, for introducing the team who's here and are all happy to are part of this and happy to help answer questions as we move along. So next slide, please. So this topic came out of kind of two sources: the transportation chapter of the city's comprehensive plan, Mobility for All Modes, which really establishes our transportation vision, thinking about safe movement of people and goods, across the city by all modes, multimodal focus. And of course, as you know, the City Council's strategic priorities for this year was really emphasizing prioritizing safety for pedestrians and cyclists and incorporating the principles of complete streets and Vision Zero in our transportation improvement projects. And I'll also introduce our senior transportation engineer, Uros Jovanovic, just has joined us as well. He also joined the city this summer. So both Tahir and Uros are new to our team and are really integral parts of this work. Next slide, please. So I want to do a little level setting on a couple of these definitions and terms, which I thought might be helpful to the cause. So Vision Zero is a movement that started in Sweden in the 1990s, and it was really a goal of zero fatalities or serious injuries on our roadways. As many of you know, many cities have kind of formally adopted Vision Zero policies. New York City, Washington, D.C., Arlington, Alexandria, others. And so that is one approach, is to say Vision Zero per se, which is zero fatalities or serious injuries, which is, of course, a worthy goal. The next slide. Another kind of more nuanced framing that's used sometimes is the safe systems approach, which has these 5 kind of sections: safe people, safer vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. It's a little more nuanced. It kind of talks about how, humans will make mistakes on the road. Humans are vulnerable, but safety is proactive. And this idea of redundancy, sometimes a Swiss cheese approach, they call it, where you have different layers. And this also really talks about, the police department and EMS and a variety of things beyond the scope of kind of planning and DPW. But other ways to think about engineering, enforcement, education, behavioral changes. Next slide. Complete streets is another term. It's kind of a broad approach to planning, designing, building, operating our streets that really focuses on kind of multimodal uses, as well as things like green infrastructure and bioretention and street trees and bike lanes, and not prescriptive of those items, but really thinking holistically about our streets, which is what we do, and certainly built out urban environments like ours. We are designing complete streets, but there are also ways to kind of clarify that is a policy as well. Next. And then I think the last of these kind of terms at the beginning here, NACTO, which is a term some folks kind of toss around, but wanted to be clear, that is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. So it's an organization whose mission is to kind of take a more progressive approach to designing in streets that are kind of safe, sustainable, accessible. It's sometimes used as a shorthand to refer to these kind of planning and design for progressive multimodal streets. They publish these design guidelines, which are useful tools and references, and again, that many kind of urban places, including us, and kind of built out cities tend to reference. Okay, so next slide, please. So that was kind of the intro. So what we are kind of proposing for discussion tonight is a Vision Zero or Complete Streets program for the City of Falls Church that has 3 main components: the Safe Streets Working Group, the Complete Streets Toolbox, and safety culture. So we'll go into each of those. But this idea is that we don't need to start from scratch. Many of our peers and others have similar programs. We can draw on those best practices from other jurisdictions, build on our existing projects and programs. We're not proposing a new separate portfolio of work. This is integrating with our existing projects and programs and staff, but really taking a multimodal lens, data-driven, cross-functional teams, proactive. We discussed it with CACT on October 8th, and then after discussion here, there's a draft resolution in that staff report for consideration at November 10th. Okay, well, I can go into each of these aspects. So the Safe Streets Working Group is a monthly meeting with DPW engineering staff, DPW operations staff, planning staff, and the police department staff. We have had 2 of these meetings. We started in September. We had another one today. And so it's getting this group together to really do a few things, starting with data, focusing on implementation, and then eventually assessing results of getting these safety projects. Next slide. So starting with data, this is an approach we've talked about. There is Virginia DOT data. There's Falls Church Police Department has a weekly crash report that is helpful. Of course, the Smart Cities program, which with the VTTI that has been discussed here before, is generating a lot of data on near misses, on hotspots, locations of injury crashes. And so one of the things we've been talking with staff trying to do is how do we use this data to say, oh, this is where there's a lot of side swipe, left turn, pedestrian crashes, and how can we drive our solutions towards those locations. Next. And then focusing on implementation. And so we've heard many times that the idea is to get some things in the ground. And we're certainly doing that, and our staff has been doing that for some time, but in a more kind of targeted way to see if there are short-term implementation improvements, sometimes with in-house resources, sometimes with contractors to really address these safety items. So some of them will come out of the NTC program and community concerns. We'll get to Annandale and Gundry in a minute. Some might be proactively through crash data. And some of them might be kind of a quick build installation in advance of a CIP project. We're looking to build out a cadence of these types of projects. And I'll also note that we have had and want to do a better job in communications of highlighting some recent wins in this regard. Some of you may know Southwest Street, there were 2 speed cushions installed last week on October 13th that closed out that NTC project. Sharrow in Virginia, some curb extensions were installed by DPW operations as part of that NTC project. Hillwood Ave and Brook Drive, there's a missing links project ongoing, and 3 new crosswalks were installed by DPW operations. Also last week, the Roosevelt Avenue, that segment of bike lane, Gresham Place, don't block the box, striping and signage. So I'm kind of rattling these off. This probably might be more helpful if we're thinking about how we best share them and communicate them to everyone. Next slide. And 2 in particular, this one, my timing is maybe slightly off. So this is West Annandale Road and Gundry Drive. I'm very familiar with it, I think. There's been an NTC request, but also a lot of community concern following a near miss. So staff kind of put their heads together and said, how can we make some improvements here? And there was some paving money that was available to be used. And so we are going to be repaving this poor condition of Annandale Road. And doing some striping, which will narrow the travel lanes to 10 feet, add 5-foot bike lanes, which is part of implementing the bicycle master plan. So this idea of, we'll talk more, I think there's an upcoming council meeting about the bike master plan, but the thought here is as we find opportunities to repave and restripe, if it's in the bike master plan, to do it at that time. And then some stop ahead markings. So this we're looking currently, weather pending, the first 2 weeks of November. I know it says October there, but, and that's something we're excited to move forward on. Next one. And then the last kind of deep dive here is Great Falls and Little Falls right out here. There is an NTC project on Great Falls, but there's also an engineering assessment by our team of the outdated infrastructure. Many of you have seen those signals are kind of hanging on by a thread, but also an engineering assessment to see what is the safest design for this area. And staff in engineering and operations has concluded that a 4-way stop is the recommended approach here. And so what we're trying to kind of still work through the timeline of is making sure we provide enough notice with variable message signs, new traffic pattern coming, and that we do it in a responsible way and in accordance with all the best practices, but to remove these signals and make it a 4-way stop and repaint those crosswalks. And that's looking like a December timeframe now. Next slide. And these we don't have to go into great detail on unless you want to later, but starting to think about some of these upcoming, again, items to do once a month or so. Some no turn on red signage where it's makes sense, working with police and analyzing the mast arms. Lincoln Avenue in Great Falls and Lincoln Avenue, there is, again, an NTC project, there's a CIP project, and there is an opportunity to do some kind of quicker street safety projects there. So we'll be having more conversation and can talk more as needed. Park Avenue and Maple Avenue might be an opportunity in advance of the Park Street Great Streets project. Oak Street Elementary School, there's a memo from the CACT with a number of recommendations that we're also analyzing, and then additional locations kind of based on crash data. So this is just one portion. Again, some of us had a meeting earlier today, and we were like, well, in addition to these, there's a whole bunch of other requests. And so part of it is for kind of leadership and staff and all of us to be helping to triage and prioritize how we can get some things done effectively. We want to be able to continue to do these safety implementation projects, but also thinking about all these different programs, how it fits together. And this is, of course, in addition to the large CIP capital projects and other work we do. Next slide. And then the last part of this Safe Streets Working Group is assessing results, which we haven't gotten to yet, but the idea is, and potentially with our Smart Cities program, doing some type of before and after analysis or dashboards or maps like other communities do to say, this is where all the speed humps are, or after we installed this, we saw a 64% reduction in crashes, or some sort of data. And that takes time and effort, and we'll have to think about the best way to do that, but some way to assess our progress is helpful. Okay, next. The next piece of this program is we're calling it a Complete Streets Toolbox, which and so the kind of the need here, which we've heard in various conversations with council and others, is to have some design guidance and best practices that support our street safety goals and meet our operational needs. It kind of keeps coming up in different conversations that we need to have something in paper for both staff and the public. One aspect is the Complete Streets Checklist, which I think has been discussed with council before, which staff is working on right now, and that would be used for staff to help assess both CIP and developer projects to make sure that we're kind of, clarifying expectations, streamlining review, keeping a lookout for all of these, very, not prescriptive, but complete streets items. We're also going to be developing some guidelines, which will help with some standardization for things like, lane widths or where we put vertical traffic calming. Again, like DC, Arlington, some other folks have published, this is where we put speed humps and this is where we don't put speed humps. And that's the kind of thing we can build off of what other communities do and, make sure it makes sense for us. Not prescriptive, like we will always put X in Y location. I heard from some folks making sure we, still allow for creativity and context-sensitive design, but also providing some guidance. And then we're going to be scoping for a public facilities manual, which would be part of a NFY27 kind of consultant-led project, but that's another piece. Okay, next, just a couple more slides here. And then the third piece of this puzzle, which kind of going back to that safe systems approach diagram I had earlier on, is thinking about a culture of safety. And that's a real part of this too. And so educating, staff and the community, how we talk about this safety work, kind of best practices for safe driving near trail crossings and the like. Training, education, professional development, communications, coordinating with the police department. Next slide, and we're almost done. And a couple ways we propose to do this are kind of training and professional development. There's low-cost webinars that we propose doing with staff on Vision Zero, safe driving, also things like construction and work zone safety, maybe offering it to everyone who drives a city vehicle or a motor pool vehicle or our operations staff who are driving vehicles, just to kind of, again, level set. Pursue joining NACTO, that National Association of City Transportation Officials, has a small city level, and that could provide staff with a lot of connections and professional development opportunities to further this type of work. And we're also working across teams, including with police and sheriff and operations, on some vehicle policies, including some standard operating procedures and policies for staff who drive city-owned vehicles, including the shared motor pool. So this is like another aspect of this street safety that is relatively, lower cost lift, but some policy things that could make a real difference. And I think that is the last slide. And so I will leave it there. There is a draft resolution in the staff report for your review, and propose that would be discussed on November 10th. And all of our colleagues are happy to, discuss further. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. We have been all heavily awaiting this, and so this is great. It's really comprehensive. I think we've all said multiple times that transportation safety is like the number one thing we hear. I'm sure the candidates out there probably, as you door knock, this is top of mind for lots of them. The other thing I often say is that it just takes time and patience and a lot of money to transform a city, right? So a city that is really built around car infrastructure, we're a city like most suburbs in the United States, it just takes time and patience. I know that we are less patient because we are experiencing our streets. And so I always say that it is really important, but also the work that we're doing does take time and effort. So thank you all for leading the charge on this. I'm going to open up for questions, starting with our guests, the CACT. If you all would like to comment or ask questions first.
I think commenting would be good, but I'll start with the members of the CACT. I will comment that this is, of course, of great interest for the CACT. We've been anxious, and the other two members of the CACT actually had planned to be here. However, they both ran into family illnesses. So sick child trumped the meeting. Sorry. Somebody like to go first?
Well, I just have to put in
If I could request microphone? Thank you.
David, better. Or that's green. I just would like to put a piece of information in about this resolution is, I think there's another thread through it, which is, I think it will help the CACT work more closely with the government, with the city. And I think there are a number of things that we will be educated through as well, and we'll be able to educate them. So I think it's that interaction that's going to help a lot.
I guess, quick question, Tristan Sellard with CACT. Understanding, the goals of Vision Zero, also recognizing that under the bipartisan infrastructure law, additional resources were made available through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. Just curious, understand we're coming up at the end of that program as it currently exists under the current highway reauthorization, but curious if consideration had been given to whether or not resources from that program could be leveraged for whether it's planning, demonstration projects, some of the implementation projects that are considered here. To the mayor's point, these projects require money, and when it's available, interested in considering whether or not it's a good fit here.
Yeah, so you referenced the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program from USDOT. At least, I don't know about previous years, but this past year, we did look into it and consider it in the conversation with our Smart Cities colleagues. Kind of decided that at this point, some of that money would be really focused on kind of planning and visioning and coming up with a concept. And what we were kind of kept hearing is start moving forward towards implementation and getting things on the ground rather than spending a year or two developing, planning is great, but rather than in this case, spending a lot of time and money on developing a complex plan. But, grants like that certainly are things we're keeping on our radar, and even as they continue to change with USDOT.
Yeah, thank you for that. Makes complete sense, and be curious to see what future iterations of that program look like.
I was just going to say that for our large CIP projects, we do rely heavily on federal and state grants. The transportation projects are really expensive, and so we do rely on those dollars there. Other thoughts from the CACT?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Let me be clear. First of all, I do support the goals of reducing injuries and deaths. I do have concerns about the emphasis, the autocentric nature of this presentation. The request, I did read the request. It cites the fact that other jurisdictions, including the District of Columbia, have adopted similar resolutions. What the request doesn't say is that while the district's goal was 0 deaths by 2024, the 24 death toll rose to 40, which was the highest in a decade. So I don't think citing the district as Vision Zero really strengthens the argument here. What is missing in this request is an understanding of the importance of mode share. Nick Simontelli at Greater Washington writes that Vision Zero is meaningless unless we get more drivers off of the road. The city's comprehensive plan envisions choices in travel modes, equitable access to all, and is multimodal and data-driven. But let's consider the concept of multimodalism to antitrust monopolies. In 1945, Justice Hand wrote that a market share of 90% is enough to constitute a monopoly. You may know what the mode share here is in Falls Church City is, but I think automobile mode share is probably close to 90%. We really don't have balance here in this city. According to the Transportation Planning Board, the figures that I saw were about 12.2%. Finally, let me quote Todd Littman of the Victoria Transportation Policy Institute, who writes that increases in motor vehicle travel increase crashes, and vehicle travel reductions increase safety. Thank you.
Thank you. I can just quickly respond. Yeah, maybe I didn't emphasize enough. The use of multimodal is as a term as we think about that cars. I think you're right. I didn't say it maybe explicitly. Cars are, for the streets are for the cars, but also for pedestrians and for cyclists and buses and supporting multimodal options is really important here. Yeah, appreciate those comments, and we can maybe kind of think about that a bit more explicitly.
Thanks for bringing that up, Stu, and thanks for the brief. It was I appreciate that, and your culture of safety. I think so. As Dave brought up in our last meeting, 7 and 29 can also be considered highways, right? Like more non-city residents use our streets than city residents, honestly, right? Like, let's be frank. And we might not have that much influence on that from inside the city. Like, I mean, people are they're coming in, they're coming out, and really, honestly, we just want them to I think we just want them to just come in and out and just get on out and come in and out as efficiently, I think, as we can, with efficient light, efficiencies and everything, and just be on your way slowly and safely, I think. So that's a priority for me, I think, come in and out and be on your way. For a culture of safety, I think for city residents, I really appreciate what the school did last week in putting out the information about the e-bikes. Thank goodness my teenage boys and their new obsession with the e-bikes, fortunately our e-bike is 750 watts and less, we found out, so we're street legal, even though I make them ride on the sidewalk, and they are wearing a motorcycle helmet. And I don't understand it, and anyway, it drives me bonkers. But if, unfortunately, some of their friends are driving this non-street legal bikes, right? I'm not the only mom in here struggling.
Yeah, they're
with
called
this,
e-motos. They're
right?
like dirt bikes. Yes.
Right. So anyway, I appreciate that, because I didn't know what the code, the Virginia law was, right? So I appreciate the school putting that out, right? The school recognized that this is an issue.
Yeah.
and
To give
they're-
kudos to the police, it was in collaboration with the police.
That's awesome. So they're helping put this out, right? So that's another thing, kind of along with the Oak Street Elementary memo that I put out, and I really appreciate the council's support on this, and the DPW and the planning with our meeting that we had a couple weeks ago. Everybody's supportive of that, and I really appreciate it. And that's kind of another thing that goes along with that is I would like to continue to educate our public on okay, hey, do you own property that is right up abuts a sidewalk? Hey, by the way, you don't necessarily own right up above the sidewalk. So let's not put a big old retaining wall right up against the sidewalk, right? Let's not put bushes right up against the street so that people turning can't see around your big bush, right? That's the kind of thing, culture of safety that I would like to see more of, as going along with that transportation safety kind of stuff. So anyway, I appreciate you bringing that up. There's probably other stuff I was going to talk about, but anyway, that's where I'm ending up. So thanks for letting me ramble.
So there's a couple things here that I thought have gone really well. One big one is the process that the city has been following. That they brought it to the CACT ahead of this meeting, I thought was very helpful. We got to understand what we were going to be discussing here, and I think our ability to contribute to the council was greatly enhanced. Also, looking at this deck versus what Amanda brought to the CACT, I can see that she heard what we were saying and incorporated elements of that. Not everything, but she heard what we were saying, and I appreciate that heavily. The other thing I'm seeing with this approach, there is a general approach in the past of a waterfall process of we plan, we design, all big things, piece by piece. I've seen it a little bit with the solid waste, where it broke it into pieces. I'm seeing it more here, where things that we can do, we move forward. It's a much more agile approach, and it allows things to get done faster and better. And I appreciate the focus on implementation. One comment I would like to make on the two items is that during our discussion at the CACT, I understood that DPW is taking the paving money and trying to stretch it as far as they can, trying to make the best use of the funds that they have. And so I would raise the question of whether some of the extra funds from last year could maybe be used for these two implementations so that DPW could then use that money for more paving in the spring. Kind of, that's something only City Council could bring in. As far as complete streets, I have been a proponent for many years, since we got briefed way back. And the standardization that it's going to bring, I think, is incredibly important, because that, to me, is what we're really missing in the city, is consistency. And it is property line to property line, so that we are talking about sidewalk. It does cover sidewalks, it covers bike lanes, it covers all these different pieces. It doesn't have to replace anything that already exists, it just creates an umbrella that brings it all together and gets us that consistency. The last thing I would say is on the working group, one suggestion I made previously, and I would be open to this, is I think the citizen participation in the solid waste task force, I think, was very useful. I think maybe this is an area where something could be useful, a citizen member, just getting that early feedback, a different perspective might be helpful as part of that. And that was it. And thank you to the council for having us here to focus in on this. It's a big deal. I think it's moving forward nicely.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for the comments and questions. Start with Dave as the liaison to the CACT.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thanks for the work of the CACT. Thanks for being here this evening, sharing your views, and I know you'll share your views going forward and all the work that you've done. So this is the number one issue that our citizens bring to us. The second issue is the problems are citywide. It's not just one stop sign is being run, or one red light is being run, or one right turn on red is being abused. It's citywide, so I very much appreciate a systemic citywide look. Secondly, the look, it needs to include, of course, the two major kind of programs, if you will, that have been mentioned, complete streets, et cetera. But it's really critical to bring together those. But also, Amanda, if you need more resources to do this right, please bring that to City Council. I think the City Council has been very receptive to the needs to address this issue. And it's a very complicated issue. It's not an easy one. And so if you need additional expertise, please bring that on. I think this is the beginning of one of the most significant proposals that we've dealt with in years, frankly. And so I wish you well. So let me go on to a couple other comments. I very much support the notion that this needs to be multimodal. This is not just about cars, this is about sidewalks, this is about bike lanes, about pedestrians, about supporting business, but also encouraging people to come into the city, but also creating in them a culture of safety, and that's been mentioned. So one of the suggestions I have early on is bringing communications right from the beginning. I recall the head of the Fairfax public health in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, saying I always thought of public communications as being sort of a secondary tangential issue to what we do, and that the medical issues are what we need to focus on. What I've learned is public communications is just about number one. And so I would urge that you bring in communications to our public, but also as we mature this program, and hopefully very rapidly, it's about creating clear messages to people driving into the city. I recall humorously the Volvos, and way back when Don Byers' Volvo provided the city Volvos, and it made national headlines, not just because of the expense of the cars, but I think the sense was, if these people are crazy enough to spend that kind of money on their police cars, they're probably going to enforce the law. So humorously, that's an example of where we really need to go. And again, it's looking at the psychology of drivers who come here and the overall sort of things that will really motivate and change behavior. And again, that won't happen immediately, but I think it's fundamental to success. So the culture of safety involving the schools, multimodalism, these are all elements of, I think, a dynamic program. And I really want to conclude where I began, which is we've had a couple decades now of trying really hard with individual projects, and we've had some moderate success, but the public is saying it's not good enough, it's not enough, and we need to respond to that. And I think this is moving down I almost said moving down the avenue, I won't do that, but moving in the clear direction of what we need to do to address this. So I couldn't support this more strongly. Wish for success, and I know that you'll have very broad support in the community, and I think on the city council for this. But this is really the kind of thing, bringing together these different departments, this different expertise with the addition of communications, that we can really address these citywide issues. Because as I started, this is not just one block, one stop sign, but this is a citywide issue, our greatest challenge and our greatest opportunity, and you've provided that opportunity. Thank you.
Justine?
I would like to echo what my colleague Snyder said. I'm really excited for this. So thank you for bringing this. This is part of the reason that I ran for council in the first place. I care so deeply about this topic. Actually, one of the motivating factors was I would love to be able to bike here and bike around the city, but I'm one of the people who gets very stressed out, and I prefer low stress streets, and I am not able to bike to City Hall from my house, even though I live, 7 blocks away from here. This is a start of the transformation that I'm really excited to see. I have about 10 things that I'll try to get through quickly. Looking through this document, I think there's a lot of stuff that I am excited about. The NACTO mention, they, for me, are gold stamp of approval for what we want to see in the city. Also, the mention of the NACTO small cities peers. That's awesome. That's a great way, I think, that we can learn from other cities. So that we're not just in an isolated bubble, but we can see what's going on elsewhere. So I was really happy to see that. Also glad to hear that we're not reinventing the wheel. Even though DC might not be the perfect standard because they've had pedestrian deaths, which is horrible, I have seen a transformation in DC over the past 10 years. And so they've added more bike lanes, they've added more separated bike lanes. And so I do think that there are things that we can learn from Alexandria, Arlington, and DC, places that have implemented these things before us. And maybe there's things that we can learn not to do too. And so find out what's working, what's not working, and we don't have to start from scratch to do this. I would love if there were a way for council to get updates on that data and the priority list. It doesn't necessarily have to be an update at a meeting, but even just like a short memo or something, so that we're at least informed of what's going on. let me see. And then I guess related to that, and so maybe this is a question for you all, you know, how will the council and public be kept informed about the results of like safety reviews, what projects are coming next, what problems are noted but might not have the ability to solve near term? I don't know if that's like too early to answer right now, but do you have any thoughts as to how you might address that? And it's okay to say
No,
not
yeah,
yet.
that's a good point. I think we're still kind of
Okay.
formulating that unless
Great.
anyone else has
Okay.
anything to add.
Well, I think those
That's
are,
a good
I mean,
point.
as we go through this process, you know, it's funny, it's like you share a little bit with us and then we want even more. So,
If you give
yeah,
us a cookie.
I think those are, as we go through this process, I think those are things that are gonna be really important is, as my colleague Snyder was mentioning, the communication part. And so, you know, maybe it's something that we've been talking about for years, I feel like, is a list of priority streets, but then also having the metrics as to how these streets were chosen and whatever else, because oftentimes, I think I get like 10, I don't know, it feels like 10 requests every like quarter for like, can we have, you know, traffic calming on my street? And so having some way to be like, hey, check out this website. Here's a list of, you know, the 50 streets before you that we've prioritized. So that, because I think people are so focused on their one street, having a better understanding of everything that's going on in the city is so useful. But that to come as we go down this path. Other things, I am curious. So you mentioned the public facilities manual. I have some ideas of what's in a public facilities manual, so I'm wondering if they're in them, but if you could just explain what the purpose of the public facilities manual is.
Yeah, so the purpose of the Public Facilities Manual is going to be to have our own manual, which has all of our city-specific design standards. And then also, because we are so small, we're not looking at like a 3,000-page manual like what VDOT has, right? So then there'll be instances where we lean on other localities for those standards that they've already created. So what it will really do is establish what our standards are for the city of Falls Church specifically, and then what other jurisdictions are we going to borrow their standards from where they've already invented them.
And so I guess what I'm wondering are, like, would this include residential areas? Would this include whether or not people can put a retaining wall right up against the sidewalk, I think as was brought up before, or whether or not people can put plantings or a curb cut, or sidewalk with standards for residential areas? Or is that beyond the scope of what a public facilities manual is?
So it could potentially include some of those things.
Okay.
It really will focus when it comes to transportation infrastructure for the area that's within our right-of-way.
Okay.
So it wouldn't extend, you know, into any private property. It'll be the city standards for where we have our right-of-way, and then for our other assets. So we're also planning at this point to include sanitary sewer and stormwater as part of that public facilities manual. So it'll be a transportation, sanitary sewer, stormwater, public facilities manual in terms of what our standards are for the infrastructure that we will build in the city.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think something that's come up, and I mean, maybe it's related, maybe it could fit into this, and I don't know where it would fit if not here, but something about a shy zone and especially with sidewalks, and especially if the city does have a right-of-way where neighbors are putting plantings or fences or things that are intruding on the sidewalk, or even retaining walls, some way for, I guess, I don't know, to have a standard there where like we don't allow, 3 feet, especially if there's a right of way there. And that's part of something that the permits office looks at. I know that's something that's come up at least with me a lot in the past. I'm not even sure if it would fit in the public facilities manual, but
Zoning.
yeah, maybe it's like zoning. Okay, so maybe that belongs elsewhere. Okay, but anyway, I guess if there's a way to include some of that, because I hear a lot about especially our residential streets too. Okay, let's see. A For Dummies version, yeah, right. Let's see. So then, so my understanding and what I heard was, as we're repaving roads, we will be implementing the bike master plan and putting in and seeing where bike lanes fit to as we're redoing roads. would that would also be the case for the complete streets? So basically, is that true? Like, as we're redoing roads, we would basically have this complete streets checklist to look at each road to make sure that okay.
Sure. So for annual paving, and I think that, I thank everybody in this room who was part of advocating for additional money for annual paving. It's been a game changer, as you can see by some of the stuff that we're sharing today. But for annual paving, we have to make sure that we're maintaining that asset. And the scope of that work would really just be curb to curb work.
Okay.
So where we can fit in a bike facility, if it's in line with the bike master plan, we will do so. There will be instances with annual paving where we can't do that within the curb lines. So we won't be able to add that facility because that money is for the annual paving. With our larger projects, where we would have to move a curb line or get additional right-of-way, we'll be looking at it through that lens and ensuring that that occurs.
Okay, and so maybe for complete streets checklist or whatever, there would be a bump out or something else that might be, or like sidewalk widening, or I don't know, whatever else. But that's not part of the annual paving budget, therefore that wouldn't get implemented until there's a larger project on that street.
Correct.
Okay, that sounds correct. But the what I would consider low-hanging fruit, things that can just be paved easily, would be part of that. Okay, that's helpful to know. And then I guess, so you mentioned a lot of the work is being done in-house for some of these road changes. Do you have the people and funding that you need, and what does that look like going forward?
So one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about recently as we were preparing for this presentation is the extra $220,000 we got last budget cycle for on-site consulting support. And all of the schematics that you see for neighborhood traffic calming, the Annandale and Gundry schematic that you see, those are all things that we've been able to accomplish because we have that pot of money to lean on-site consultants. So it's been really valuable for us moving this type of work forward. The on-site consultants that we currently have, they have access to certain design softwares and resources even within their company. They might be on site, but they've got multiple people deep that they can go to within their organization to help us produce these designs and look at things. Utilizing various professional standards and also thinking about unintended consequences that with such a small city staff, we might not have the ability to do with how large our portfolio is. So that's been a wonderful pot of money for us to start to provide, some of the things that you're seeing today. And if we could find a way to continue that level of support, we'll be able to continue to provide that type of design when it comes to quick build projects.
Great. Okay, so yeah, I guess basically going into the next budget cycle, it would just be so helpful for council to know some of these things like this. This means we can get, like 5 more streets done, or we can get, whatever else done, because I know that this is a huge priority for many people on council. And then I guess when it comes to increasing our road paving budget, when we are looking at complete streets for the road paving budget, I guess to follow up on the previous question, if we did have a plan, like we need to have bump outs here and a ramp here, I don't know, all sorts of fancy things on the street, but we just don't have that money as part of the road paving budget, we would be thinking about those additional things that we would add in and making sure, I guess, as we're repaving the road, that we're not doing anything to preclude or make it more expensive to do those sorts of features in the future. So there would be sort of a comprehensive thought-through process as we're repaving the roads alongside the complete streets plan. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Then the other thing, I want to say I love the idea of the before and after analysis. I think that's also just such a great part of communication for people to see like how things have improved and what the changes have been. Because I think all the time we implement projects and then we don't necessarily know what happened or like what the effects were. We assume, but we don't know. So I know it's more work, but that's, I just wanted to plus one that. I guess for the complete streets plan, or checklist, as we're going through that, is that something that would go before CACT? Would it go before council? Would there be any input in that process?
Yeah, maybe do you? I mean, possibly.
I think that our plan would be to share a draft. I think that's what we had mentioned previously, is once we have a solid draft that we'd share it for and try to give feedback from CACT and potentially council as well.
Fantastic, okay, that's wonderful. And then, yeah, I guess, would public facilities manual go before CACT? Would that be something that would be in discussion, or is that something that's more internalized?
I think we're still working through that with the scoping. Once we figure out how other jurisdictions have done this and what role it should really play, we'll have more information on that.
Great, okay. And then, I guess, final couple things. I went on a walking tour this weekend, and we were passing Annandale and South Washington Street. So I know that that's something that's going to have a big redesign at some point. I saw it on the list of CIP plans, I guess, in the future. And so design work on that would start, it sounded like fiscal year 2027, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
I thought that was one of the ones that we deprioritized to take money out.
Oh, okay, so maybe it's later.
There were
I don't
two
know.
projects that we,
No, it's Annandale and
Yeah,
South
the next
Washington, so it's one over from the traffic circle.
Yeah.
And so I guess, I don't know, so I don't know what the status of that is, but like for some of these upcoming CIP projects, would we be able to implement, I guess, a complete streets look at it when we're moving forward with it, even if we don't fully have complete streets in place by that point?
Yes, I mean, that was there was an NVTA grant application for this project, so I think it is in the out years, I don't remember the exact year. And I think you're saying as we scope, so that project does not have a design right now.
Yes, there's no
So
design.
as we develop that design, yes, I think we were looking at a holistic lens, complete streets lens on our projects.
Great, okay. And then I just wanted my final things are for the upcoming projects that you mentioned. Could you talk a little bit more? So the Lincoln Avenue and Great Falls Street intersection, basically the plan there is to take a look at that intersection, figure out how to make things a little bit safer, but then also put in bike lanes from that intersection down to the bike trail. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what staff are currently looking at. So Lincoln and Great Falls, that was the part that's in a later phase of the CIP project for greening of Lincoln. So we're saying, well, are there kind of more immediate things that can be done with kind of paint and flex posts that would still, make a real difference for safety for all modes. And as part of that, we're looking at, yes, the Great Falls portion from like kind of the Lincoln Park through the intersection to the WO&D trail. Adding bike lanes on both sides, because that is part of the bike master plan. Thinking that would be, again, kind of checking off the bike master plan as we move along. That has not been, we have not had a public meeting to share all this. I think we may be having some smaller group meetings on some of these greening of Lincoln items, and then trying to think about how to best share that. So that one's not going to be installed probably till the spring, so there will be some more time for some more engagement around that with folks.
And then I guess we're still moving forward with phase A or phase one of greening of Lincoln, which is mostly the stormwater.
The stormwater portions, yeah.
And then could you just quickly remind me, is there timing on phase B yet?
Phase B is the transportation, roadway stuff from west to Greenwich. We were just talking about that with our project manager today. I don't have a firm update. I think we're going to have, some additional kind of small group discussions about where we've landed on a couple of the specific street design items, and then having our consultant move that to 100% design. So there'll be, I think, another engagement on where we've landed on that design.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you for answering all these questions. And I'm really looking forward to making progress on all of this. So thank you.
while we're on greening of Lincoln, we had people come to office hours last month that actually asked for specific updates on greening of Lincoln, the transportation component in particular. I think they wanted to know, based on the input they gave, about raised crosswalks versus speed bumps, and then also lane widths, and maybe there's one other item. They would just like a circling back. So before we get close to 90% or 100% plans, they would like an update.
Right, and I actually was at a PTA meeting the other night, and a couple approached me who also lives on Lincoln, asking me, haven't gotten any updates, we don't know what's going on. So I think we just need to do some sort of communication with everyone on Lincoln, from start, yeah, because I think they lived closer to the Arlington side. So I said to them, I'm pretty sure nothing is going to, that we're concentrating on the west to Greenwich in the first phase, but I didn't, so I think we need to probably just send some letters to everyone on Lincoln to try to give
I
them.
want to second that since I am impacted by Phase A. So the communication kind of dropped off a little bit.
Yes, we will do that.
There's also there's an email list for the project that, okay, but I guess there hasn't been much communication on that. Okay.
Mary Beth?
Thank you for this presentation. It is great to see how you're thinking and combining big things and how they fit into Falls Church. So I really appreciate that. And I will quickly go through. Most of my things relate to slide 17, the culture of safety, because I feel like we do need to add like a C.3, which ties into what Justine said and what Jessica said about making sure the community gets it. So they're all tied in. I've often thought that we need like welcome sign. We need welcome signs coming into Falls Church, which I've been saying for decades now, and we have them. But we should also say, welcome, please drive gently, or there should be a community-wide, like there's beach communities that say that, or something within the community to educate. Because 20 is plenty, but all throughout the city, that continuing thought, and you hit the nail on the head that there are a lot of people that just come right through, and they're only looking at us as a throughway. So one thing is we do want those people to stop and shop or eat. But as they're going through, and as it's pleasant for them to go through, we want to make sure that message is out there. So there's that community, the culture of safety for anyone who's using our streets in any way. I think that is really important. And then another, and this is another community thing, the light at, this is an example of how we can, just things that people don't pay attention to or we think we're communicating on and people are missing. So the light at Washington and Columbia that is going in, and there's a little sign there. Somebody said to me recently, well, I drive through that intersection every day. I had no idea this was going to happen. And I tried to stop and look at the sign, but I was driving and it's a QR code and I couldn't take a picture and I can't read the sign. And so I said, well, what are you looking for? What do you need? What do you need to know? And she said, I said, do you read the focus? She's like, we read all those things and we just didn't know. But we know it's coming. So how do we get it from we know it's coming, the website knows it's coming, to the people really understanding it's coming? And I think that, and that coming and those small changes are big deals. And for those people, once it's done, they're going to forget that it ever happened, right? Their intersection will be better, but how do we prepare them along the way? And then street markings is something Justine was talking about, but I'm also wondering if there's anything in here about even narrowing streets that just have parking on the sides without a line in the middle, just to put those lane markers for parking on the side. Is that contemplated at all?
You mean a street that has just like no markings on it at all?
No markings on it at
then
all.
Mark out where the parking is?
Where the parking places are, because that visually narrows it as well.
It does. I think that would probably be a case by case.
Case by case, okay.
Thing that we would consider, but yes, kind of visual narrowing is definitely one of the kind of traffic calming tools.
Okay. That is all I have. I'll pass it on to someone else. Thank you very much for this.
Laura? Okay, I'll jump in. Thank you. I thought this was a terrific, when I was looking through the slides, I was very excited. I thought you guys did a terrific job. And thank you for that point about having that little pot of money. That's really important for us to know. Because as the mayor said, this is the number one thing we hear about. And I'm door knocking now, and it continues to be something that people really, this and sidewalks and all that. So just a couple of things. One is, I loved when you were rattling off all the things we've done and accomplished. And I don't know, do we have a page for that on our website that says, sort of tooting our own horn, like these are the great things we've done in the last 6 months?
Not exactly. We should, and
yeah.
You kind of referenced that tooting our own horn exactly, and so I think that's something we're trying to think about how to best communicate.
Yeah, the mayor and I sort of giggle like, you know, the schools do a great job of patting themselves on the back, so we need to too. So anyway, just to figure out some way to really, for you all to shine and say like, this is where, you know, where money is going, your taxpayer funds are going, like we're doing these things. And also thank you to the CACT. I know it is a lot of work, and you know, you all are engaging with the community, and we really appreciate it when you raise things to our level as well, like Oak Street Elementary. That was great. So thank you for your work on that. I was really interested. I liked this slide to everyone's point about, I think Mr. Whitaker's point about multimodal on slide 5. I really liked that, what is a complete street? But I also thought it was really interesting. I was reading the active roadway, and it talks about how important it is to have left turn lanes, because you see more crashes with people trying to, you know, so I live on the east end of Broad, so when I'm going to take my kids to Meridian, you know, I'm going down Broad Street, and there's no left turn lane from until I get to West Street. So if, you know, I'm going by the Whole Foods, you know, all the way down, you know, Solis, all that, Godfrey's, keep going, no left turn lane. A little one for Harris Teeter, but generally what you see is people making a left and people trying to get around that person because they're holding up traffic. So that might be something on our list for way down the road, but could we try to figure out that part of Broad, how to work in a left-hand turn lane? I mean, we would have to expand, I don't know, but I just thought this is sort of what this is saying too, is that without left-hand turn lanes, there's a lot of congestion, and aggressive driving, frankly. You know, I don't know if it's feasible or.
Yeah, I would just say when you last said kind of aggressive driving, I think that's kind of the key there, is telling people to stop kind of behaving like that, which we all know people do. I don't know. I think it would be, again, a kind of a context sensitive. We'd have to look into it, but we are in general not looking to widen.
Right, and I understand that.
Widen roadways and add more lanes, because that increases speeds.
Right,
generally.
right, and I understand that. I'm just trying to think of ways to, you know, once you get to West, then you've got and you know, it's more, I guess, commercial developed further up, you know, as we get closer, go towards Tyson's. But I just thought that was interesting, the active roadway piece on that side. I really like the idea of doing the stop signs at Great Falls and Little Falls. I think that's really good. And I was, and I'll let Erin lives right around there, but I did float that idea with a couple of her neighbors when I was door knocking, and everyone was sort of surprised, but when they thought it sounded really good. Also, like for pedestrian safety, to you know, especially I always worry about kids crossing there trying to get to the community center and all that. So, but one other thing, I had already thrown this out, I think, to our city manager, also on Great Falls, this is also another thing on the list to look at a later date, but thinking about, could we do a 3-way stop at Virginia Avenue in Great Falls? So a lot of my friends who live on Virginia have a really hard time getting out onto Great Falls because traffic is speeding. And then one of the women when I was door knocking who lives on Great Falls, right across from Virginia, said that once people get past that bike path and they're heading to Washington Street, because they're past the bike path. So could you slow things up by having a 3-way stop there? And that is one of the reasons I think traffic doesn't speed on Park, because we've got stop signs and I know Mr. Shields has told me sometimes there are accidents with the stops, but I didn't know if that might help slow down traffic on Great Falls.
Yeah, I mean, our engineers will have to look at that. Stop signs are not always warranted or not always the best measure to achieve that result. But I think, we were talking earlier, I think our engineering folks are going to send a response on that question and a couple other things at Great Falls in Virginia shortly.
Okay, great, thank you. And I know our mayor, several of us attended a meeting with Senator Salim and our state senator, and we talked about traffic, and I know specifically our mayor talked about it would be nice if we had more authority to put in things like speed cameras and things, enforcement, but unfortunately right now, Richmond only lets us do that in school zones. So, and then I guess, yeah, that's basically, I love the NACTO, I love that small city, as Ms. Underhill said. I think that's excellent. The more that we can learn from our neighbors, the better. So that's it for me. Thank you. This is a great presentation.
Go ahead.
Thanks, everyone. I'll be pretty quick. I echo everything that everyone said already, and thanks again to CACT for all of your continued work and engagement, which sometimes, I know feels drawn out, but hopefully we're all kind of progressing here together and getting on the same page. For me, this sort of boils down to, I think, kind of having a default policy, which makes sense, that we aren't spending more time trying to get, the plans, but actually saying what, as a council and as a city and as a community, we want to prioritize. And so I did appreciate seeing, the complete streets graphic, and my hope and expectation is that, as we're doing planning, that we are prioritizing, bike and pedestrian safety, that we're thinking about how do we slow cars down and not sort of, what is the default speed at 25 miles an hour, and like what are the sight lines that we need to accomplish or like permit that speed, but that we're saying, what are the trees that we need here? What are the landscape, buffers that we need here? How are we going to make sure that this is a pedestrian friendly street? How are we going to make sure that people are biking on it? And if cars need to go like 15 or 20 miles an hour to accomplish it, so be it. We'll like slow the cars down instead of planning for them. And so I appreciate kind of the resolution, and we'll end up, supporting the resolution. I think there's also signals an expectation that we need to be nimble and want to be nimble with our implementation. I echoed Justine's comments about, wanting to maybe see some sort of dashboard for transparency and visibility, both as a council and a community and boards and commissions, into sort of what is coming next, and just the workflow even and cycle for staff of like, when you do the paving, like, okay, if you don't see yourself on the paving list, it might be next May before we're doing the paving update again, where that's going to get kind of reprioritized based on new inputs, right? Or, what comes up in terms of whatever other, lists are happening, that people can figure out where are they going into the queue, or when is the queue getting like reevaluated based on current needs, and that sort of data-driven assessment that staff will be working together to make. As far as picking up on Laura's comments on Great Falls and Little Falls, I'm supportive of the four-way stops. We'll see sort of how they go. My hope is that, and I think this raises a question about, not sort of treating blocks or intersections as standalone projects, but when you're looking at them, sort of saying what is adjacent to this intersection that we need to correct at the same time in order to ensure that this is functioning in the way that like we need it to. And so I think, right, I see cars flying down Little Falls all the time, coming up Little Falls, down this stretch, through the Park Avenue light. And, for me, it's kind of like putting a four-way stop may make sense there, but is it going to be as, or accomplish as much as it could if we're not like doing the four-way stop at Park and Little Falls at the same time, right? Or if we're not looking at the North Maple Great Falls intersection that also has problems at the same time, right? So getting those crosswalk legs in, not only on Little Falls and Great Falls, but like seeing a block away where we're having problems for the cars not obeying the stop intersection before they're going into the next stop intersection, like making sure we're getting those legs there too, so that we're like dealing kind of in clusters as opposed to dealing in single sort of spots. So I guess I would call it like the work and then the adjacent intersection sort of informed kind of view of it. And then kind of, we're small enough that I think we, can have informed projects, get good feedback on the projects, and if they're working well, and even like hopefully get out to test those projects. I'm sure you have like testers in the CACT members and hopefully staff even. Like I was on the block, I was happy, right, that the bike lanes went on the block between Broad and Hillwood, and then I drove from Oakwood over to Cavalier Trail this past weekend, and I actually like drove right down where the bike lanes were implemented and got to the stoplight to make the right on Hillwood, and saw that the sign is still there where it says like driving lane straight, and then the right lane is for turning. And I was like, well, the right lane doesn't exist anymore. Like, should this sign actually be there, right? And so I took the picture, I'll send it in, but at the same time, to me, it sort of was like, oh, well, if we said this is done, can we get like a tester out and someone actually go through it and see, does this make sense as a person on a bicycle or as a driver now interacting with something we just kind of fixed? And then the budget piece, I would echo everyone's comments on like, do come back to us. I think we're interested in knowing when you view something as cost prohibitive, and, you know, whether a budget amendment makes sense or like how much extra something would be to sort of do it in its ideal form or a better version, where we can accomplish some of these multimodal goals than sort of doing the like improvement without being able to do the painting or the striping or the whatever else comes with it. So thank you all for your continued work on that.
I echo pretty much everything everybody said, and including the thanks to the CACT and especially the staff. This is really exciting to see after, I know I've been watching it for 5 years, and many have been doing work much, much longer than that to get to this Vision Zero and Complete Street concept in the city. I think that's just fantastic. On the budget item, once upon a time, we were like, well, let's give more budget to work on these things. And they're like, that's great, but we don't have the people to do it, or we don't have the ability to execute on this. And we, you know, push some of the funds forward. And that your commentary about the consulting on site, that's going to be particularly key, I think, in defining how that helps throughput and how it helps to execute. So, you know, clearly kind of defining, okay, here's what we need for the materials, here's what we need for the consulting, and here are any limitations we may have based upon staff time, other projects, you know, understanding that when we're going through the budget is going to be really important. Everybody wants to support it, but if we're putting money there that we can't actually use in that fiscal year, it can be, you know, used somewhere else more effectively. Also, you know, echo everything everybody said on education. You know, we can do everything right on the engineering and the, you know, the streets and the signs, and if people aren't following any of them, it doesn't really matter. Like, that's what we see in a lot of places. Like, well, we have the signs, we have this, we've done all the right things, but we're still crashing. So it's, you know, I think that wherever we can do education is fantastic. And I also think that education on how diverting people from cars to other modes of transportation, continuing to do that, and why it matters, not just for the environment and for, you know, your health, but also for it limits crash. You have fewer cars, you have fewer crashes. It's you know, a simple mathematical equation. I know that people much cleverer than I can turn that into something that's really digestible to people to think about, and it's just another way to address keeping more cars off the streets, to Stu's point. And also on education, this is kind of a random one, but understanding right-of-way, like when you talk to people about what the right-of-way is and what, you know, what a resident owns versus what the city owns and what they're responsible for versus the city, you know, it's kind of confusing, and I really don't think people understand that, and might put those bushes someplace where you can't see things, and you're like, that's not actually your property. But a lot of people just don't know that, and we don't have the people to necessarily enforce it you know, that's not our top priority for enforcement necessarily. So again, it goes back to education, like how do we educate people on what a right-of-way is and what they're responsible for and what the city's not. And just echoing again on the data, you know, I worked in that smart city space for a while, and I'm really fascinated with it, and I'm excited to see what that does and how it informs and how we track, and I really think you guys are thinking about this the right way, and I look forward to seeing it executed. I can't imagine it's going to do anything but make great improvements on the safety and the ease of moving around the city. So I think that's it. I'll leave it to Letty, who I'm sure has additions too.
I do. Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, you can tell the enthusiasm from council is because we've been talking about it for a while. And so I guess a good way to sum it up is that we feel heard because we've been talking about safer streets, investing more and more, you know, data-informed kind of decision-making and implementing and testing learning. And so this is a really good comprehensive summary of that. So thank you for listening to us, hearing the community input on how important this is. I do have some specific questions. I think I agree with all of my colleagues on the direction this is going, but some specifics first. How many fatalities or serious injuries do we have, or have we had? I think we are close to 0. I'd like to obviously keep it that way, but I guess that would be a nice thing to remind ourselves. Maybe it's in that public dashboard that we've all talked about. But if the goal is Vision Zero, it would be nice to be able to track that and again, hold ourselves accountable of how many we've had to date, or maybe we haven't had that many, which is also good. Some of us think it's mostly due to luck, but as more people are experiencing our streets, I don't want to leave it up to luck, which is why we have this program going forward. So that would be a nice thing to call out. Second thing, I think might be what Art was suggesting, but in the working group, I know it's contemplated right now in the past 2 months, just be DPW, planning, police, but is it worth having someone from the CACT be part of that discussion, just for early awareness? No. I'll leave it up to staff to decide, but that's something that maybe in their monthly meeting, you can get a report out of like, here's what we talked about. I just want to make sure that that continued conversation happens, because I think we're looking to the CACT to be our advisors on this. I think a big theme that you've heard throughout this is how do we have better communication? Not only toot our own horn about celebrating what we've done, but I would love for this dashboard concept to be what's been done to date, say the past 3 to 6 months, what's in progress right now, and then what's coming up. Just like how we start, we have a council priorities dashboard every quarter. I think the public would really benefit from that. I think Mary Beth's point about not knowing when things are coming, we have to share it in multiple channels. If it's in the Focus, it's got to be on the website, it's got to be a social media post, got to be some in-person signs. But I think that also gives us a sense of what the throughput is. And it also helps with some sort of level of accountability, because I want to hold ourselves accountable to getting more projects done and actually getting being responsive to where we actually have crash data and issues, right? On budget, I really like that we have a goal of sustaining kind of project every 4 to 6 weeks. I think as it relates to the upcoming budget conversation, I guess what would help me figure out the right budget allocation is that what we think a sustainable pace is? And do you have the current resources to do a project every 4 to 6 weeks? So that's kind of one question. The second is, what is the total master list of things we think we want to do? And then the council then can say like, oh gosh, if the list is 50 items long, if we get one done every 4 to 6 weeks, that's 2 years. Does that feel, and then obviously we're going to add more to it, right? But I think I need to know both kind of what are the resources you need to sustain 4 to 6 project, or for a project every 4 to 6 weeks, and then what is the master, the universe of all the things that we think we might want to get to, and that could probably be a pretty fruitful conversation. Likewise, you've heard me talk about this master sidewalk list, right? We have a lot of requests for people to put in missing links or add new sidewalks. I can't tell whether we are putting enough money in them without knowing, here's the 50 sidewalk projects list we have, so-and-so who asked, you're number 25 on this list. We're getting to a sidewalk project every 3 or 6 months. So that would be helpful for the budget conversation in a couple months. I looked at the resolution draft. I would love to see language in there. It looks good right now for Vision Zero, but to see complete streets reflected on there as well. So I would suggest adding a sentence or two to reflect the conversation on complete streets. And again, the emphasis on multimodal. And I guess it would not be a transportation safety discussion without me hitting the bingo card for asking about LPIs. So this is one that I ask about every, 6 months or so. But I think last time we were told that as we were upgrading more signals, we'd hopefully evaluate more intersections for leading pedestrian intervals. I've been like total convert. They're like one of the cheapest and easiest things that we can do at intersection safety. And so as more of our signals get upgraded, I would really encourage us to expand LPIs beyond the 9 that we have. And I'm pretty sure we don't even have 9 anymore, because sometimes something happens with the signals where they don't have LPIs on them anymore, because I ran through the city. And I was like, what happened to the LPI? So just a request to evaluate intersections for LPIs where possible. And then my final comment is really around the culture. So I'm going to pick on Justine a bit. Right now, we're in this place where we have to prove why we need 10-foot lanes. To know whether this is successful, I would love to get to a place where we're proving why not 10-foot wide lanes. And that's the difference that I would love to see us get to. Because right now, we keep pushing for these things as things that we should do. And I would love to get to the place where it's the default is we should have 10-foot wide lanes. We should have streets that support all modes. And then we should prove why we're not doing it. And so I would challenge us to hold ourselves to that as kind of, how do we know we're successful?
You guys said so many things that I just wanted to chime in on. I just wanted to quickly +1 the default having 10-foot wide lanes. To Aaron's point, I would imagine if we are going through repaving a road and we did have a complete street plan in place, I would imagine that it would be somewhat more cost effective to implement a complete street plan as we're repaving a road. So if there are cases where a little bit of extra budget and we're able to plan for this in advance, and maybe it's part of a CIP project, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something simple that we could do through FlexiPost or whatever else, and a little bit of extra budget could go and help better implement a complete street plan as we're repaving a road. That would be something that I would certainly like to know, especially as budget season comes up. So just a couple things that I was wondering, would it be part of a complete street checklist? So things like if we have something like a bike lane ending, and then like every time a bike lane ends, we want a ramp to the sidewalk so that people who feel unsafe biking in the road would be able to easily get to a sidewalk. Other things like considering raised bike paths versus like on-street facilities and what level of safety we want for certain bike paths. Or looking at when we're implementing bump outs, making sure that there's ways for bicyclists who don't feel comfortable biking in the streets, and there's a bike lane that ends at the bump out, that people are able to safely get to the sidewalk or get over the bump out as a bicyclist. And so would those sorts of things that I'm mentioning be part of a complete streets plan, or is that something separate? Because those are things that I would see would be important, but like, I don't know if they would necessarily fit in.
No, I think that's really good feedback, and we're very early in developing this plan, so that's something that we can look into in terms of connections, right? So any place where you have a piece of infrastructure that's gonna ultimately have some sort of connecting piece, I think that's something that we could look into adding to the checklist, just looking at those connections for each project through that lens.
That would be fantastic. I know we're early, we haven't even started the process, but I appreciate that, thank you. And then my final thing is on left turn lanes. Actually, rather than widening roads, there's actually something called a road diet. Seminary Road did this where they had 2 lanes in each, on each side. They ended up putting in a bike lane and getting rid of 2 lanes. Imagine that, they got rid of 2 lanes, put in a left turn lane. Bike lanes on both sides, and actually traffic is flowing a lot smoother now than it did before because people aren't stopping and starting. So you actually don't have to widen a road to have things move smoother.
And that's what that yeah, it's a you have one through lanes on each side, and then a middle lane.
Lane,
is your,
yeah,
is your
exactly.
turn
So
lane.
there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
ways to do things without adding
Yeah,
risks.
yeah,
But anyway, I just had to throw that in because I couldn't help it. But anyway, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Tell you we're enthusiastic. So thank you to CACT and thank you to staff for the really good work on this. We look forward to
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just one key point. Councilmember Downs raised the issue about legislation and electronic enforcement. That has been a priority, probably our #1 priority in our legislative package for a couple years. We've testified on it, and you bet it'll be part of our legislative program. So thanks for discussing that with Senator Salim. We'll make sure we follow up.
Thank you. And while we're on that, thank you very much, Mr. Snyder. And while we're on that, I know right now the idea is, you can do it in like speed cameras in school zones, but I didn't know if there's any way we could advocate for or municipal buildings that are frequented by, like a library or a community center. Like, I'm wondering if that would be one way we could, because it's, school zones don't help us in our case from where our schools are located aren't always the most, but if we could do something, if you could include that, that would help like a Great Falls Street, with the community center right there.
It's actually a bill last year, Delegate Siebold and I talked about it actually at Saddam's meeting. Her bill actually said it was going to be based on where there are hotspots, like where there's crash data or indicated safety issues, except that VML and VACO opposed it because the bill was also written in a way where the revenue from the cameras would go to Richmond instead of coming locally. And so I made the suggestion, I'm like, well, if you had more of the money coming locally, VML and VACO probably would support it. And so I made that suggestion that if she would consider rewriting the bill for that reason.
That's great. Yeah, because I think, if we could get it I know they're never probably going to give us the ability to put it, but at least maybe that would be the next step is say government-owned buildings that are frequented, a community center or library. So again, I worry about our kids who are walking to these places.
There was one suggestion, I don't think it ended up in that bill, but somewhere along the legislative discussion for having it in your senior center, like a building that's all, seniors, because of the speed at which they may be able to cross the
that's a
street
good point,
or,
too.
to slow down traffic near it. I don't think it ended up in that particular bill.
That's a good point, too.
Yeah, it wasn't added, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think adding the focus is good, and that's probably more successful, slightly more successful, I should say, than the holistic bill. The big challenge is trying to make sure the money stays local so you can do more safety programs and not have it go to Richmond, because then that puts us in an opposition mode. But we'll keep working it. It will take multiple years, and I don't think we'll see it out of this next General Assembly, but
Great. Well, thank you again. Are you
Can
all-
I have one interest, I'm sorry, I know we're done, but this is, I had the most interesting thing. Someone said something, I had never even thought about this. This is just yesterday, I was door knocking, and the gentleman brought up the Green Union of Lincoln. And so he said that, and I never thought about this, he said, I don't think it's fair because the residents on Green Union of Lincoln, once that is all, those improvements are made, their property assessments are gonna increase. And why do we not, why did they get to get that done and other streets don't get to get it done? And I thought this is, I mean, I never thought about that. So, but it is, kind of goes to the point of, you know, is there a list somewhere that, you know, that the public can access? And, you know, I talked about a lot of it was, of course, also state, you know, funds and all that we had gotten from the state or the federal government. But again, if there was some place that people could go and look and feel like they could, you know, send us an email and say, hey, I'd like our street to be, I don't know. I know that a lot of that's CACT stuff too, but I just thought it was interesting. I'd never had anyone say that to me before. So
Really disruptive, so hopefully they feel that way after the construction
Well,
process.
then I also said, why don't you talk to the folks on Lincoln?
I don't expect my property values to increase.
And I would also say that the stormwater components help everybody downstream because there's a lot of detention and sort of biophilic design associated with the project, and that helps the whole watershed.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you again. You're welcome to stay for the next item, which is our ADA transition plan. I know that might be a
By the way,
business.
one quick comment. You asked about the fatalities and stuff. The CACT dashboard from July, we actually were down on, last year we had a fatality. But traffic injuries per 10,000 residents and bike pedestrian injuries were both much down in 2024. 2025 was a jump up, but we're probably down to, we're down below or at pre-COVID levels now. So that's
Good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And
besides.
there is a road diet in the bike master plan
Yeah.
for East Broad.
So besides showing us projects, I guess I want to ultimately get to those outcomes, right? And how are we doing ultimately on crashes, fatalities, injuries, and make sure that we are moving the needle on those metrics. So, okay. Do we need a quick transition time to get to ADA?
And Cindy, while we're transitioning, can I ask you a random question that came up when ESC was talking about the master planning, you know, when you came and presented was presented last week? They, ESC asked me if we're talking about tree canopy, and tree canopy's maxed out at 10% for the state that we can mandate. Is there anything different you can do on government-owned property? Like, could we say for our own, city hall and our schools and whatever, that we must have 20%, or we can set our own mandate for that?
On city property, yes, of course.
So they wanted to then introduce, like, we should be doing that. We should have a minimum tree canopy in all of our, schools and our city property, and encourage us to continue developing that as well, so.
I assume we
Random
exceed.
segue. Well, no, I mean, setting a higher bar, like continuing to set a higher bar.
I guess the only concern, like, does the library have I think that might have hindered the libraries, but I don't know, there might be some issues there with certain properties or
Yeah, well,
city
you start
properties.
whether you can or not, and then why you should and how you would implement it, that would be beneficial. All right, that's just my
Okay.
random.
ADA transition plan.
Okay, everyone, if you can pull up the slide. So this is the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan, which is, we'll tell you more about it. So we're also joined by another DPW staff member, Kong Nguyen, who is a CIP Transportation Project Manager. He's been managing this. I'll let you add anything you want. And then we are joined by two consultants online who are going to lead some of the slides, and then Kong and I and our other staff will chime in. We also did present this to the Human Services Advisory Committee, HSAC, last week. I don't know if any of them are joining here, I can't remember, but we spoke with them last week, had a nice conversation. And this also has a draft resolution for your consideration for the November 10th meeting. So Kong, do you have anything to add or introduce the team?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kong Wen. I'm a CAP project manager for the ADA transition plan. And I think, thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. So I think now I will transfer to the consultant who will do some presentation for you all tonight.
And can we also just note that Mr. Nguyen, in the course of doing our ADA transition plan, met with community members who have disabilities, traveled the streets with them to gain that additional perspective, and really appreciate all of his energy and thoughtfulness in putting this plan together.
Right. I think we have Chris from the consultant. Yeah, you can unmute him. Yep. And
Hi, everyone. Chris or Matt can go. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, Chris. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity, Council, Mayor, CACT, to present to you all tonight. My name is Matt Poole with Kimley Horn, and it was a pleasure to work with city staff. I served as the project manager for the consultant team on this project. My background is in transportation engineering. I've been with Kimley Horn for almost 13 years, and most of that time has actually been spent working on pedestrian access projects, specifically Americans with Disabilities Act self-evaluation and transition plans. So excited to share an update tonight on all the great work that's been done, but I also want to let Chris introduce himself. Good afternoon, or good evening, Council. And my name is Christopher Smith. Been working with Matt Poole for 7.5 years, predominantly on ADA transition plan and pedestrian safety. I'm a JS professional, so I do a lot of data analysis and mapping components that are part of the ADA transition plans. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so hopping in on the next slide, just some background on the plan itself. Kind of similar to the Vision Zero action plan we just talked about, this is a city master plan, but it's specifically focused on accessibility. And so we want to ensure that for any programs or facilities offered to the city's public, they're accessible by everyone. Which really means ensuring not only, or if someone has a disability, that they're able to use the facilities in the same way as someone without that disability. And so really the key element of this plan is developing a comprehensive list of what are called barriers to access. Again, these can be programmatic, which could be information even presented online or at city council meetings. But also physical in nature. And so I think we can all relate to a pretty easy example of a physical barrier. Let's say there's a sidewalk corridor that runs along a city roadway, and that sidewalk leads up to a curb, but there's no curb cut or curb ramp to cross the street. That would be an example of a barrier to access, because someone using a mobility device, particularly maybe a wheelchair user, would not be able to cross the street, and so that would be discriminatory in nature for them. Again, the plan is really a comprehensive listing of barriers of that nature, but not just identification and listing of those barriers, but also information about how to mitigate and remove those barriers, including an outline of the methods to remove them, as well as information for scheduling that barrier removal over time, over a multi-year period, and then development of conceptual budget estimates or cost estimates associated with those necessary improvements. And again, really a lot of that cost and schedule information is focused heavily on the public infrastructure, given the extensive nature of mitigating those barriers. This plan is required by law under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But really, failure to complete a plan of this nature can result in the withholding of state or federal funding, or even litigation in the form of settlement agreements. The enforcing agency is the Department of Justice, and there can even be private lawsuits. So having this plan in place sets the city up to, again, work the plan over time and really be protected from any of those potential consequences just by satisfying the requirement of having the plan in place and then having a schedule for implementation of the improvements within the plan. And lastly, again, this is intended to serve as a long-range planning document, not simply a record of the current status of facilities or programs or city compliance efforts, but again, a multi-year improvement schedule associated with that. So on the next slide, ADA Title II, there are 5 titles of the ADA, but Title II is specific to state and local governments, and again, ways in which you provide programs or services to members of the public. And so just to reiterate, the ultimate goal is to have non-discrimination based on disability. We need to ensure under the ADA Title II requirements that individuals with disabilities are not excluded from any programs, services, or activities that the city offers to the public. And once again, those are kind of broad terms, but any physical infrastructure, sidewalk corridors, areas within public buildings, park and recreation locations, all would fall within the city's programs offered to the public. And there are some key administrative requirements to developing an ADA transition plan alongside that comprehensive documentation of barriers. First and foremost being the designation of a city staff member as the ADA coordinator, which Cindy Mester serves in that role for the city. And so we definitely documented that as part of the transition plan. Her information is available online. If any member of the public needs to reach out, has questions or concerns related to access. Also, the city must develop and post what's called an ADA policy statement. This is really just an acknowledgement that the city understands the legal requirements under the ADA and is working to ensure compliance with those. And similarly, development and posting of a grievance procedure or a formal process for making complaint related to accessibility specifically. It includes timelines for members of the public to respond, or excuse me, to file agreements, and then as well for city staff, the ADA coordinator to make a response. There's even an appeals process, but all of that was developed, those first 3 bullets as part of the plan, as well as the more intensive portion of completing that self-evaluation of all the programmatic elements and physical facilities offered to the public. And so we'll talk more about the evaluation shortly, but again, after kind of completing those first 4 bullets, all of the information is compiled together in the form of a long-range planning document known as the transition plan. On the following slide, what we have looked at to date as part of this plan, really a very comprehensive focus and evaluation on elements within the public rights of way, as well as at city facilities. And so the table on the right quantifies the facilities evaluated as part of the plan. And again, this is really a comprehensive listing of those elements that are offered to the public. So there were 10 buildings, 12 parks, 32 signalized intersections, 39 miles of sidewalk corridor, including all driveway or intersection crossings, as well as any unsignalized intersections, either at driveways or cross streets where there were curb ramps. So that's kind of how those quantities were developed. But just think of it as the entire continuous pedestrian path of travel in public areas. Again, within parks, it would be any recreational facilities, any amenities, play areas, ball fields, trails or pathways throughout, and then buildings, parking at parks as well, but parking, paths of travel from parking inside the building, and then public areas like transaction counters or restrooms. All of those were subject to the ADA compliance evaluations and have been reviewed with their compliance documented as part of this process. And for each of these locations, there is a lot of data that includes all the compliance information as well as reporting, individual reporting for each facility, and a geolocated GIS data set that we'll talk more about here on the following couple slides. The evaluation approach that we took for this project, again, was ArcGIS, GPS-based data collection, meaning that it is all geolocated, associated with the actual locations of the facilities. We were boots on the ground, so we had team members physically in the field looking at each of these facilities, recording measurements and dimensions, slope values, other ADA compliance information, and a specialized application built specifically to document and analyze ADA compliance. We had levels, tablets, tape measures, and recording all that information again digitally in GIS, as well as taking photo documentation of the conditions in terms of accessibility compliance at the time of evaluations. And all that, again, allows us to group the data, the compliance information, even some information we'll talk about for prioritization of improvements and the conceptual budget cost, all in a kind of a map-based environment where you can zoom to a location or a facility and pull up all that information very easily. So on the next slide, just kind of showing some of the resulting compliance reporting documentation from those evaluations. On the right, you can see an example for an intersection, and this report summarizes, again, the compliance status, conceptual budget costs for improvements, what the recommendation is as far as how to bring whatever the facility type is into compliance with the ADA requirements. There's also barrier priority information, barrier priority information, high, medium, and low. And really what that barrier priority is based primarily on the severity of non-compliance with the standards. So let's say a sidewalk is supposed to have 2.1% cross slope or less. If we saw, for instance, a very extreme slope value of 8 or 10%, that's going to be a much higher priority than maybe a 2.5%. which is out of compliance, but still much closer to that threshold of 2.1%. This information, again, having all of it grouped into a database allows the establishment of improvement schedules, the ability for the city to compare conditions across the data set and really target and carefully plan the improvements that'll have the most impact to the public. And all this information was compiled into an appendix alongside the transition plan document. In addition to kind of switching gears from the evaluation elements and the actual compliance results, understanding how the facilities are used by the public and what areas may be most used can help provide some additional layers as far as thinking about the implementation of the improvements. And so there's also a requirement of the plan that we incorporate public input. And so a public outreach feedback form was developed and was made available early June 11th through July 6th of this year to help get some of that input. And we received a great number of responses in that time, 197 individual responses. And these are summarized again in an appendix A of the transition plan. But what was most striking to the team as we reviewed that feedback is that it really mirrored a lot of the results that the data was showing as well. For example, there was indication from the public that power pole obstructions in the sidewalk are an area of concern, as well as brick pavers causing trip hazards. And at any locations where those were identified specifically by the public, it was clearly shown from the data side as well that indeed these are accessibility barriers, and some good confluence there in terms of the things that we heard most from the public and some of the common findings statistically from the evaluation of the facilities. And so just to give an example of, again, some of the types of questions that were asked in the public outreach, we aim to target the different types of facilities that we just described: public buildings, public parks all parks and recreation areas, and then public rights of way, sidewalk corridors. And so this first question was specifically focused on any physical barriers or obstructions at public buildings. And so kind of going top to bottom, respondents answered yes if they had experienced barriers or obstructions in the green at the top, no with the blue bar, and then yellow is no, but someone I know has, or teal is not applicable to me. And so it was, pretty clear from this chart is not a lot of people experiencing obstructions at public buildings. But if they did experience that, there was an area for comment, and we were able to take individual responses for them to describe more about that issue. And that was question 2 of the survey. As we look to the next question as well for parks, essentially the same question, physical barriers or obstructions at a public park. And again, the trend was really pretty much the same. And so, again, lots of no's and then fewer yeses, or the other no, but someone I know has, or not applicable, or no, I don't visit the parks. But as we get to the next question, which as we are switching facility types to the sidewalk corridors, you can see kind of a different data point there where we have a lot more yeses, which really does make sense. Not everyone's going to visit every, city hall or the library or every park, but most of the community does use the sidewalk corridors, whether they're in their neighborhoods or along, different areas throughout the community. And so that's to be expected. It's pretty common with results we see doing similar work for other communities across the country, but it also can help guide and frame maybe some of the areas of focus as improvements are planned to be implemented. And last but not least, this next question was focused really specifically on the presence of curb ramps, where sidewalk, again, that kind of example mentioned at the start of the presentation, where sidewalks will lead up to a curb, but there is no curb ramp present. Again, a pretty decent chunk of the responders, over 30%, indicated that they had experienced an issue of that nature. So again, just kind of in summary there, some great responses and helpful information to help guide improvements, and really allows the community to put this alongside the project data set and determine which improvements may be most impactful for some of the early years of implementation in this multi-year plan. On the next slide, really speaking of the plan itself and addressing barriers, this emphasizes, of course, the large need. You saw the quantities of facilities earlier, many miles of sidewalk, parks and buildings. Kind of wanted to give some background on the costs shown here. They are focused specifically on removing barriers to access, removing areas that are outside of ADA compliance. However, these costs are also all completely independent in terms of this summary does not incorporate any dollars already allocated towards CIP or other community programs or funding. And so we'll talk more about it on the next slide, but that this type of funding will be wrapped in to all kinds of more broad community planning and project efforts. There is a 20-year implementation schedule shown in the plan right now. So again, what that is saying is that these improvements are scheduled to be completed over a 20-year horizon. And again, the high, medium, and low priority shown here is really based on the severity of non-compliance with the ADA standards. But that, needs to be considered alongside other community priorities and planned projects. And so we don't want to necessarily imply that all high priority barriers should be removed before any of the medium or low priority. There's, again, this is strictly an accessibility focused lens, but with an understanding that there are many factors and elements to any improvement project for capital projects. And, kind of on those next steps, I guess, Amanda, did you or Colin want to take this slide, or should I continue?
Yeah, I can take over here. So for the implementation and tracking, staff do not intend to address the ADA barriers as a single annual project. It's a long-range planning document and guiding resource that staff will consult to integrate into infrastructure investment through like capital improvement program or annual paving plan, missing links sidewalk gap program, or sidewalk maintenance and repair program, facilities maintenance program, or private sector development projects and other opportunities that it comes in the city. And then the consultants has provided staff with a GIS dashboard and best practice for implementation and tracking for the ADA issues that we have within the cities. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the end of our presentation. Thank you, Matt and Christopher and Kong. And so we have a draft resolution, which is essentially, adopting the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan and telling staff to, go forth with the project. But we're happy to address any questions you might have right now.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start with the CACT while we still have them as our guests.
Thank you. So I'm narrow-minded, admittedly, on pedestrian safety. So, admittedly, it seems obvious to me there's a couple like hot spots where we've got all these power poles right smack dab in the middle of the sidewalks. So a couple that come to mind to me are Northwest Street and South Oak Street, right? And so it's just why is there a 20-year plan to fix everything? And I get there's a lot of stuff. I understand respectfully. There's a lot of stuff, but then there's these just glaringly, big stretches of sidewalk that is just can we just look at this thing? Can we do something about it? So just throwing those out there as a couple examples. Also, just want to point out that I've got my eye on the Fellows Park, which also abuts the South Oak Street is right across the street from the South Oak Elementary School, right? Am I saying that right? Yes, so on South Oak and Oak Street Elementary School, which I think I hope everybody would agree that South Oak Street Elementary School needs parking on both sides. So I think we need to, narrowly, it's in my memo, we need to have, we need to narrow the driving lanes by having parking lanes on both sides of the street. And we also need to do something about all those parking, all those power poles on the one side of the Fellows Park. So just throwing that out there, something to consider. We're at 30% plans right now on Fellows, the Fellows property right now. So I'll stop rambling, but food for thought, please. Those are just that's what's thrown out. That's the big softball at me right now. Thank you.
So I actually have some experience with accessibility, and that's a key thing I see here. I like that at the very beginning, they mentioned an accessibility master plan, and accessibility ADA compliance is just a small piece of that. This is focused on the physical plant, the roads, and the thing to keep in mind is that the ADA, the act itself is 35 years old. It does not incorporate anything around digital. And it's critical that that be included on any accessibility. I would encourage City Council to be looking at this as we need to be thinking about accessibility for all users. We want to get away from detailing onto an individual, okay, what's the slope? We need to be in compliance on the slope of a ramp, but at the same time, we might look at it, well, how do we eliminate the ramp need? So that we have, if we have a raised intersection, you don't need a ramp to the sidewalk because it's already at the same height. And that universal design concept, as we get into new facilities or, for instance, Gordon Road, anything any designs there should be embracing universal design concepts and accessibility for all users. So get rid of the ramp completely and just make the entrance at ground level so that you don't need to do it. You're still in compliance. I go to the last page on this deck, and it's the same thing on every deck we have, which is that the City of Falls Church is committed to the letter and spirit of the American with Disabilities Act, and I would say that that's too narrow. I know that statement is there for legal reasons, but we should be embracing that we're interested in the spirit of accessibility for all residents, and that's all accessibility, vision, hearing, motion, all these different things. We need to make sure we're going well beyond just what is in the letter of the law and say we embrace the spirit. Beyond that, the biggest thing that scares me on this is that $31 million price tag, although I know a lot of that will be consumed as part of other projects. Whenever we do a project, we will make sure it is accessible, and so it's not really extra money, extra cost, but it's a scary number.
Questions, comments over here? Yeah. I'm just going to go around the room.
So I do have a quick technical question, as long as we have experts here. Is there a specific minimum width for sidewalks under the ADA transition plan? Or excuse me, under the ADA rules?
There is. It's a bit of a nuanced answer, unfortunately, but I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. So under PROAG, which are the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, focused and developed solely for public rights-of-way, the minimum width that is stated is 48 inches. So that would be, sidewalk that goes along the side of a roadway, 4 feet wide minimum. There are also the 2010 ADA standards, which came out prior to PROAG and were really focused, originally developed for site or areas outside of the public right-of-way, buildings or parks. The minimum width there is 36 inches, and then there's even a section that allows a reduced width at a pinch point to get even more narrow than 36 down to 32 inches for a reduced section. The PROAG doesn't specifically call out anything about a pinch point. So we aim to maintain that 48-inch, 4-foot width when in the public right-of-way. However, in certain conditions, when a pinch is unavoidable due to certain physical constraints, we can then look to the 2010 ADA standards to that guidance on pinch points. So,
gotcha. Okay,
yeah,
that's helpful. Is there anything that, like any requirements when a street doesn't have sidewalks at all? Is there a requirement to add sidewalks to make it ADA compliant? Or no, that street can just be, does not necessarily need to have sidewalks at all for ADA compliance?
Does not.
it's another great question. So the ADA requirements are really focused on existing infrastructure and ensuring that it meets compliance where present. If it's not present, it doesn't need to be installed under the ADA, but as we all know, and kind of some of the last discussion from the previous project, there's connectivity and other engineering, and general walkability considerations to be taken into account. But specifically to ADA, sidewalk is not required where it doesn't exist.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a more broad discussion, but something that I've been mulling over is, if a residential home is on a street that doesn't have a sidewalk and it's completely redeveloping into a much bigger house, are there ways that we can require them to set aside space for a sidewalk, even if they're not necessarily putting in a sidewalk, but putting something making it at grade such that a sidewalk could go in the future, or at least new homeowners are aware, because it's nearly impossible to get a sidewalk in some of these places. Unless you have, unless it's like a section at a time.
wonder if Karen Oliver's ears are burning. He had made a suggestion that for every single-family redevelopment, we should just require the sidewalk, and eventually enough of them are redeveloped that you just connect
I
all the
mean,
sidewalks.
it's a little bit of a tricky proposition because you end up having sidewalks to nowhere, but it's one way to get it done. Even a sidewalk may never happen in 50 years, but it might happen in 50 years in that path. Other things, I guess, I would encourage us not to just do the minimum. I think about for 88 plan, it's not just disabilities, it's people pushing strollers. There's all sorts of reasons that people need to be able to have access to wider sidewalks. And so 48 inches, I guess, is minimum, but I would encourage us to go beyond that as our dollars allow. I'm wondering for ADA upgrades are triggered when a certain threshold of spending is met on a project. Is that correct? So if we surpass, maybe this is something Zach told me, but maybe I misunderstood it. When we surpass spending on a project and it's over, I don't know, 100,000, then we automatically have to upgrade certain parts to make sure that they're ADA compliant. Does that sound familiar to anybody, or does that sound not correct?
I'll take a start and then welcome Matt to join too. Yes, especially when you're doing facilities and buildings.
Okay.
Once you hit that threshold, then 20% of the budget has to be for ADA compliance. Now, what that ADA compliance is a little undefined in the law, but now we have a transition plan that identifies the items in, let's say, an existing older building, and you would target that 20% of the project budget to the ADA compliance for the identified item.
Gotcha.
You also need to, when we're doing intersection improvements, for example, you're going to trigger PROAG, and then depending on what you're doing, you're going to have to look at the ADA as well. If you're starting to touch an intersection, you can't just put a street light up and leave a non-ADA compliant ramp there. So some of it is project by project matter. There's some specific examples and details you'd like to add?
No, you summarized it really well, Cindy, both for the facilities and the public rights of way. I think the only distinction is, that would be for improvements made to any existing infrastructure. For any new construction, that really should be built in compliance, given, the standards are in place, and we know we're required to follow all of those. And so that's maybe the only nuance there, but you hit the nail on the head as far as a threshold of facility alterations triggering the need to ensure compliance. And then on the public rights of way, there's a list of improvements that are characterized as either maintenance or alteration activities. Maintenance activities do not trigger the need to ensure compliance, but alteration activities do, and we have a listing of those differences in the transition plan. It's a bit nuanced, but
Actually, so that brings up the key question. So maintenance would count as if we're just repaving a street. Would improvement count as putting in a complete street program where we're adding maybe bump outs or other, I don't know, road narrowings or bike lanes?
So I can answer the paving question. So paving is actually an alteration.
Oh, okay.
And that's why we go through and we update all of our curb ramps. They specifically call out for paving, if you're going down, what we do is 2 inches and 2 inch overlay, that we must update all of our curb ramps. And so our annual paving program does cover that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I don't know, Matt, if you have anything else to add, but.
I was gonna, thank you for that clarification, Tara, and you're spot on. I think the other activities described, the bulb outs and the more comprehensive improvements, would certainly qualify as alteration activities as well, and would trigger the need for compliance.
Gotcha. Would bike lanes be considered alteration, or do you not know?
It depends on the bike lane. So if we're retrofitting them into the existing, if it's just restriping, then it would be an alteration the same way the annual paving would.
Gotcha.
But the only trigger would be the ADA ramps. So It's not necessarily triggering improvements for the connecting sidewalk, just for the ramps themselves.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
Okay, I just have two questions. The first is, Cindy is the coordinator for the general government. Do the schools have the same requirement to have an ADA transition plan? Is there a coordinator there as well?
Yes, they do, and we generally run it separately, and with the change in the administration, I do not know who the new ADA coordinator is, because it used to be the chief operating officer in coordination with their facilities director and transportation director. We do interface periodically, especially in our right-of-way and sidewalks and curb ramps, because sometimes their bus stop isn't an accessible location, and either they have to move it or we have to modify our bus. So we coordinate with them, but they have their own. And that's a great question. If I could just flag, it was in the written text, but I just want to make sure it's clear. All the facilities that were assessed in the right-of-way is for general government, not the school facilities.
Right, and I saw that all throughout the questions as well. But since many of the same people who are using school facilities are using general government facilities,
yes,
we want to make sure they're accessible.
Yeah, they are employees of over 50, so they have to do the compliance also.
Okay. So the school board would receive a similar report?
Yes, I don't recall when their last transition plan and update was done, however.
Okay. And then the planning document that that was mentioned, will that talk to the city-specific manual that you were talking about in the previous item?
So the public facilities manual, or?
Yes.
Yeah, so the public facilities manual will hold the standards that we use.
Okay.
So, as an example, when we're building new sidewalks that we're not retrofitting in as part of like a missing links where we might have limited right of way, we do have a 5-foot requirement. So that's something that the public facilities manual would call out. So that we have that consistency through the city when we're building that new sidewalk. It will be a minimum of 5 feet, that type of thing.
That's what I was wondering about, the consistency between the two. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just a couple quick questions. Do we have a grievance procedure in place?
Yes, we've had one since 1991, but as part of this process, we have updated the policy, the postings, and the grievance, both for employee accommodations and public accommodation grievances.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, do we have the public notices that are mandated by this?
Yes, we do.
And then going to the slides where we have the grid of facility type, high priority, medium priority, low priority, total, do we have a funding plan to meet all of that, some of it, or do we have the resources to meet the apparent requirements here, or the commitments that we're making?
Can I just tag on to that? I was thinking the same thing, like what's the delta of what we have planned
Yeah.
and what you're requesting? So
Right.
we need to continue to add to that.
Right, do we have a sense of that at this point, or?
Yeah, I don't think we have a clear enough sense, kind of a delta, as you just described it. I mean, as we've been thinking about it, we have our CIP projects, annual paving plan, missing links, sidewalk maintenance, facilities maintenance. We have all of these programs, and our intention is to use this document from the ADA transition plan as another kind of lens as we're looking at all of these projects. I mean, sort of like the checklist, which was a good question, and making sure that as we're doing a project, we're addressing these ADA barriers as we come across them. I don't think we have another dollar figure for you right now.
So are we committing definitely to meeting the requirements here, or we're committed to trying?
I guess I'd say we're committed to trying, to using this as a tool, as a lens, and letting us know where there are barriers that we should be addressing in the course of our work. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add. And the GIS dashboard that was referenced is, something that the consultant has, and if Matt or Chris has any thoughts, there are, best practices from other communities across the country about how to best incorporate the results of this kind of a study and fold it into our work.
So we are committing and accepting the plan. We have the identified information, and we've committing to building it into the plan and addressing it. The 20-year horizon is our planning document, and we've just sort of gotten this final results and the numbers, and so now staff will have to roll it into sort of the other CIP and projects to see what the delta is. That we definitely can't tell you. So you're adopting acknowledging adopting the plan and the identified assessment, and you're adopting a commitment to comply with the ADA, which we also federally have to do. And to the point earlier, we've always taken the approach of spirit and trying to do more than just the bare minimum. And so that's why 5-foot sidewalks are a minimum. We didn't put it into this plan because we're already doing a separate website update and ADA compliance. The website is getting its overhaul, as you all are aware, in the report to the GovOps, and it will be compliant with the 2.20 requirements by the 2027, although we're already far ahead of it. So we are trying to cover all accessibility, but you're not locked down to this dollar amount within 19 years and 11 months and 30 days, let's say. But we are committed to addressing it and building it in. Just like the Complete Streets checklist, we've been talking about there'll be as Amanda just mentioned, the ADA checklist, so that's part of the lens going forward.
Okay, the only point I'm trying to make is that I don't want us in a resolution to say something we can't or aren't able to do, and so that's my concern there. So I want to make sure we're doing the minimum before we do more, and the minimum is pretty substantial in terms of cost. So I want to make sure we're doing the minimum and that we're fully complying with DOJ requirements. I will say that some elements of this are, it's kind of ridiculous that you have an ADA plan that micromanages what the sidewalks are, how wide they are, but you don't require sidewalks where there aren't any. It's kind of, to say the least, a counterproductive, weird kind of thing, but I guess that's the reality. But the only point I want to make is this is a legally significant document. I want to make sure, and I want to make sure the city attorney really reviews this to make sure that we're complying with the DOJ requirements and we actually can do what we're committing to do. Thank you.
Laura, you wanna go?
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I just have a real quick one. So we don't have, Amanda, we don't have a master sidewalk plan, is that right? Okay. The only, I know we've sort of talked about this in different conversations to just sort of keep track of where things are missing and all that. Like, for example, there's, right in front of my house, there's one of those classic telephone poles in the middle of the sidewalk. But my street is a very low traffic street. It's a horseshoe street, doesn't go anywhere. So we don't have, but you know, my thought is like if we had some sort of like sidewalk master plan and we could prioritize those sidewalks where the pole's in the middle and it's a busy street, that seems to make more sense, you know, to me. So I just think it would be a good way, you know, maybe that's just down the road, but a good way to keep track of all of this. And then the only other thing I had a question about is actually it was on slide 12 about the addressing barriers. It was the one with all the costs on there. When we look at the high priority, is there any, again, trying to prioritize, like within even the high priority, prioritizing things that will keep people who have physical disabilities physically safer? So there, to me, there's like, yes, obviously it's a problem if someone can't access a building, but if someone who is in a wheelchair has a much more likely chance of getting hit by a car because of a sidewalk with a telephone pole, like to me that takes higher priority than a barrier issue. But I don't know if that's, you know, just when you're looking at cost, you know, if we can only do so much at a time, I feel like, again, that should take priority as things that are going to keep people with physical, you know, disabilities, keep them safer. So just throw that out there.
The CACT about 3 years ago had a great rubric that helped prioritize, like,
where do you have high commercial traffic? Where do you have vulnerable residents, whether it's people with disabilities or students? Where there's no sidewalks at all, where you might want to prioritize sidewalks on one side of the street versus one that has one side so that you at least have one safe way of getting around. So there was a very complex and actually really good rubric that they had come up with as one of their many recommendations they had given to us probably 3+ years ago. So I would encourage us as we look at prioritizing sidewalks that we already had some really good thoughts from the CACT.
And I will note that this assessment gives a breadth of detail that we just rolled up here, and anybody who wants to delve into it can go to the website and go through it. But high here is really rolled up. There's a lot of criteria under there, and as Matt said, you've got, this percentage of noncompliance to this, so you can do that. That's the minimum letter of the law. You all can put the spirit on it, which is what is that other rubric to that additional criteria that will then help prioritize the projects that get put forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have looked at this tonight. I think that at the same time, like, we're kind of conflating aspects of the ADA self-evaluation and kind of transition plan with some of the Vision Zero, like complete streets, right? Like, you want to make sure that you're thinking about streets that everyone can use and that are safe for everyone. But in my mind, like, part of the ADA transition and self-evaluation plan is that for the city, as an employer, as a provider of services, as, a place that people are interacting with, whether, it's on Title I employment issues or as a, basically the overarching, like, Title II of the ADA gets at, are you excluded from participation in or denied the benefits of services, programs, or activities that a public entity offers, or subjected to, like, outright discrimination by a public entity on the basis of your disability. And so I just want to make sure, when we're looking at this plan, that we're not looking at it solely in terms of, like, how are we incorporating it into our transportation goals and updates, but that we're also saying, like, on some of the minutia of the plan, what's happening in the building that lacks a grab bar, what's happening, with someone at a service counter, what's happening when we, don't have, like, the proper signage or proper, as Art was getting to, effective communication tools or sort of website accessibility. And so I just hope, and had sort of sent a question in about, a 20-year implementation plan is a long time. It's, like, oftentimes why disability advocates have, some kind of permanent, like, testers and permanent plaintiffs to go around and speed up localities in sort of implementing changes so that people, who are not sort of getting equal participation or sort of the same benefits of services, programs, and activities can ensure that that's happening more quickly for the disability community at large. And so I would just hope that whether it's with this budget sort of surplus amendment, we're thinking about, one of the first budget, like, fiscal year 2026 amendments, that we take a look at this evaluation plan separate and apart from, some of the CIP projects and other things where we do still want to, like, fully integrate this into what we're doing, to see, like, are there things that we could be doing sooner and that we should be funding and that we could be, like, meeting, right, compliance goals much more quickly with even small buckets of funding that would go a farther way in ensuring that people in our workplaces or people who are interacting with us as city government are able to do that in the most, like, effective and fully participatory way as possible. So I just ask you to look at some of the budget pieces. And then I know you said this went to HSAC. I guess I'm wondering, is it, for example, when the facilities comp plan chapter comes around, like, it might be a good place to also highlight, for example, like, for rec and parks, when they're looking at different facilities that we've also done the ADA self-evaluation plan, and should be thinking about that, when we're thinking about updates and recommendations for what, we should be doing to improve accessibility overall. And so maybe that's, a place to, again, further seek to sort of integrate this plan into our overall work, kind of government-wide. And then I have a slight ask, because Cindy and Wyatt know, I did justice, in addition to other work like Title II enforcement against states and localities, but sort of in Title I, ADA is states and localities and employer, and then Title III in places of public accommodation. And so I have a slight ask on pages 1 and 2 of the report. I understand why we don't mention Title III at all in terms of places of public accommodation, where this is our kind of plan, but just because we're mentioning everything else about the ADA, if we can even bracket something about Title III and ensuring, through planning and, private development in the city, that places of public accommodation are also complying with the ADA requirements, I think it's important to do, just to have visibility into kind of the whole other aspect of how people are interacting with the environment here, and even whole places like West Falls, right, where it's the whole thing's kind of like a place of public accommodation. So in that 1.3, because we basically mentioned everything else about the ADA, if we can just say, Title III doesn't apply to this city as a state and locality, but we ensure through X, Y, and Z that we are ensuring that places of public accommodation are also, or we're attentive to the requirements for places of public accommodation, or whatever it is. Just think about it.
Yeah, we can certainly add that, and certainly our building safety officials ensure compliance with ADA, the Rehab Act, Section 504, and of course, the Virginia Building Code, that all kind of loops back into accessibility.
Thanks.
I just have 3 things. And the first is, I know Mary Beth mentioned, who's at the schools doing this work, and that you said there's separate plans and separate approaches, but obviously they'll have financial components that are similar to this, hopefully not another $31 million. But I think it's important to have, when that comes, I don't know to learn what their cycle is, to understand when we'll have additional expenses, because we'll need to incorporate that into our budget as well, obviously. So I think that's pretty key. And just a +1 on the visually impaired, I know we're doing something with the website, but when we're doing facilities reviews as well, I think that's pretty important that we think about people in wheelchairs, but we don't necessarily think about the others because they're not as common. And then I'm curious from the consultants, I was thinking about your comment about the poles and the sidewalks, and we just want to move them. I've been talking about that. I've lived here for 30 years. I've been talking about the ones on Columbia for that long, until I learn how much it costs and what the efforts are and what we have to do to move them, because it's the power pole, it's 3 different communications companies that have all their wiring up through it. What are you as consultants, I see, obviously that's got to be part of the cost if we're going to remove any of those. How do you advise people, or what's been successful? I'd love for you to provide, not this moment, but provide best practices on how you go about removing something that's expensive. It's difficult. You have to work with at least 4 different organizations to underground it. Does that question make sense?
It does. Not an easy one to answer, as you just alluded to, with all of the cost and coordination necessary. However, there is some information in the transition plan about cost, not being a sole reason for not completing an activity. All that being said, I think understanding the volume of barriers to access identified in the plan, and some of that other layering that we discussed, it's not just the access issues, but who may be impacted by those, who may be most affected, what areas could we achieve barrier removal to have the greatest impact to the community as a whole? I guess kind of what I'm getting at is there's a number of different ways to frame prioritization and the improvements. And if there's a very cost prohibitive improvement that may need to be made, but there's 20 other improvements that could be made for the same budget, those are consideration factors as well.
I think that's where we've landed so far, right? It's just too expensive to do those, unless we have a private developer coming in. Where we've had it done, it's been private developers who've undergrounded for us.
Yeah, with the city's code, you require new facilities to be undergrounded. And even with like residential houses, the street may not be undergrounded, but it is from the street to the house. I think the biggest impact we've had on poles in the middle of sidewalks have been in CIP projects. And so Park Avenue, Great Street is a good example that will be removing the poles in the sidewalk on Park Avenue from North Washington to the Library of Virginia, which will be a big improvement. But when we started that project, including the little strip from Park to Broad, I think it was like 4 to 6 million just for the undergrounding part, let alone everything else we were doing. And so having those outside grant dollars is what's allowing us to progress. Now, we do have in the Dominion franchise agreement that they will move the pole once every 15 years for ADA accessibility, not underground, just move.
To a different.
But you don't move one pole, and I'm not an engineer, so I will not describe this totally right, but you got to move it in a straight line so it's, it'll function and so forth. But the thing that we need to do is the city has to provide the right-of-way or the easement. They have to have a place to move it. So what's really more easy to do is you just move the sidewalk into the street, you narrow the lane, and you don't try to move the pole. So there are some places where we've done a little bit of that, especially if we know there's a vulnerable population. But the biggest bang for the buck for really addressing it, since in a lot of cases, the poles were there first and we just put the sidewalk around it, not we, the royal we 40 years ago, the CIP projects and doing undergrounding.
So in this, just looking at the high priority, because, in my opinion, some of them are high priority because you have to put people in the roads. Like on Columbia, you have to literally spend a block in the road to get past that. So does this 13 million, because to your point, like I'm thinking $1 million a pole, roughly. Does this $13 million contemplate moving undergrounding any poles or those other things? And I don't need to see the whole thing, but I just.
Yeah, and my quote was undergrounding, not moving, because with Park Avenue.
Yeah, I'm talking about undergrounding, yeah.
The moving would be less, but it's contingent upon the site and a whole lot of other design issues, I'm sure.
What was the quote that they gave for the few poles on grading of Lincoln? Because I think there were 1 or 2 poles that they were looking
Being
at
moved, I
moving,
don't
and they were
remember that.
ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, so this 13 million, do you know if this 13 million includes undergrounding or moving any poles, or those are all complete other high priorities? If you could just get back to me on that, I'm just curious if that.
Sure, we can get back to
is
you.
part of the plan.
Yes,
Thank
we can
you,
get back to you.
and those are all my questions for now.
Can I hop on one thing that Debbie mentioned that it reminded me of, and Letty maybe are you the EDA liaison? Just to flag for them, with the new kind of wayfinding parking signs that are going in. I think previously we ended up with some issues on Park with our own wayfinding signs. And so to make sure that like with any parking wayfinding signs that are going up, that we don't exacerbate problems with how we're locating those because of whatever right-of-way limitations and whatever else we're facing.
And could I comment on that? Those went in, they put them in the sidewalks, it was a mess. And then the fix that was put in place was also not in keeping with the spirit of the law, because instead of moving them out of the obstruction, it was just pour a little concrete so that we'd be in compliance with the law and the person has to go around. And that's something I don't think we should be, that's an example of not following the spirit, but following the law. Sorry.
Noted. I think there was a good lesson learned for staff on that project. So, any other final comments? Otherwise, I'll wrap up. So thank you for the very prolonged conversation, because now we're 2.5 hours in talking about accessibility and safe streets. So clearly there's a lot of passion on this one too. I want to plus one. I think someone made the earlier comment, or maybe several of us did, about raising the bar. And so obviously like ADA is like the bare minimum, and to the extent that we can raise the bar and exceed it, that'd be great. Can we pull up the list of the 16 million versus the 31 million? I think Aaron talked about this, but I guess if I'm given a list of 16 million high priority critical things, and of those 77,000 are buildings and parks, i.e. publicly owned land, I want to fix those. Like, if you've now told us that these are serious, high-priority issues, like, I don't really want to wait for a 20-year plan to address those things. And so I guess I would ask in the budget amendment, like, what are those things? And can we knock them out with $77,000? Because if you have now told the governing body that you have ADA compliance issues in your parks and in your buildings, like, I don't feel like we can leave those unaddressed. And so that would be my first request, is that's probably the next budget item we're talking about. Instead of putting $900,000 in reserves, I would like us to consider $70,000 or so to address these high-priority ADA issues in our own buildings and our parks. That said, streets, intersections, those are much tougher, as we've talked about. Undergrounding takes a lot more time. It's more complicated whether there's right-of-way to add sidewalks, but I feel like for publicly owned facilities and parks, we should aim to do better. And I don't really want to wait on a 20-year plan to get to those. So that'd be my first request. Second, of the issues that are high priority, I'm guessing the majority of them are just legacy issues. So streets that were not really built for walking. That's why we don't have sidewalks or why we have poles. We just didn't prioritize pedestrians. I guess, does either the consultants or staff have a sense of what percentage of them are legacy issues versus what are new issues that we just honestly should know better? Like, if you're building a new building, i.e. if we have city hall, library, things have gotten new capital investment, we should not have ADA issues, because I would hope that we are adhering to those. So do we have a sense of how many of those are legacy versus how many of them are new?
Matt, I don't know if you have anything to add on kind of what's in the high priority bucket.
Okay.
But
That'd
I would guesstimate that the majority are legacy, because with redoing the library, we brought ADA compliance. When we did City Hall, brought ADA compliance. Yes, missed some signs and some grab bars in that fixable dollar amount.
Yep.
But where we've done new stuff, when we've done new infrastructure, CIP projects out on the road, those have been brought to ADA compliance. So I think the majority are legacy.
Yeah, which is helpful, because I guess my next question is, like, how do you prevent this going forward, right? Because obviously if it's legacy, it does require this like really thorough plan to assess, like, where do we have all these legacy issues? How do we kind of commit to a 10 or 20-year plan to address them? But hopefully we're not creating new ADA issues. And so I want to make sure that we don't, like, as we are investing in capital, that whatever processes we have in place, we are adhering to ADA and then some. Like, if we think we need to aspire to a higher bar. But I would hate to have to go through this every 10 or 20 years and find new things, because hopefully we're slowly chipping away at that list of 31 million and not adding to new things over time. So that's more of a systemic question. Mary Beth, you look like you wanted to say something. No? Okay. And then the last thing, the appendix is missing. So I tried to click like several times throughout the document. It was like, see this in the appendix. It's actually not in the document, because it said check out the appendix for like the details of where we have issues. So it'd be great to.
So we checked those appendix links right before this meeting. I thought they all worked.
They're on the website. So the PDF itself is like 41 pages or something. But then there's a section on the website that has that 41-page document, and then appendices A through F are separate items you can click on.
And the staff report includes that link. And so if you do the link, then you get to that. But it's not all in the.
Okay, well, I'm in the PDF, and when I click on the appendix, it didn't bring me to that. So if you read the staff, I was reading the 47-page actual.
So
Anyways,
we'll need to check those links.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the things we're improving when we do the website, to the chair to my left's point, is accessibility is for everybody, and flat PDFs are not accessible by readers. And so we're needing to change that as well for the visually impaired.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for the very thorough discussion of this. I think we're excited to start chipping away at these things, so. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all for staying so late with us.
Yes. It's 10 o'clock. Do we need a quick break before we get to things? Yeah, okay, so let's do 10:15.
Good evening, and I'm going to just turn it straight over to Melissa Ryman, our interim finance director, and she'll walk us through the budget request. Thank you, Melissa.
All right. Thank you, Wyatt. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I'm presenting tonight TO 25-19, ordinance to amend the budget for the general fund and the capital improvements program fund. The amendment will increase the general fund appropriation by $1,952,666 and the capital improvement program fund by $133,197. A majority of the amendment is to appropriate the approximately $1.7 million of surplus from fiscal year 2025 towards $471,000 for new uses, $79,000 for carry forwards of prior council initiatives, and $912,000 towards capital reserves, and $274,000 towards the permit fee reserve. The amendment also adjusts the budget for the solid waste fee that we adopted earlier this year, and the related reduction to our real estate taxes. The amendment also adds some expenditures that is being funded with new grants and contributions received in FY 2026. And lastly, this budget amendment also includes the transfer of the appropriation for the business analyst position from the Department of Finance to the Information Technology Services within the Department of Executive Management. This action does not result in a net change to the overall general fund budget. It just moves the appropriation from one department to another. We have presented in the budget amendment a list of the items that is being recommended for funding. As well, we've attached in Attachment A a list of unfunded needs that were identified during the fiscal year 2026 budget process. I'll stop here, and if council has any questions, I'm happy to answer them or get the answers for you if I don't have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Who's got questions or comments?
I have some. I know you have all the answers, so.
I would not presume to say that.
Thank you for this presentation. For the anyone public listening, if looking at the very first page, could you just explain what other revenue surplus, what that consists of? The $2,164,000.
Oh, a majority of that is from investment income.
Right.
And then about $600,000 is from fines. And then there were some from charges and charges for services as well.
But the bulk of that is from just investments.
Right, it is. It was.
Just for people to know where that is, where that's coming from. And then, I know we have the policy about the unassigned fund balance. We don't have any sort of policy about a certain percentage that should go into capital reserves, do we? Like with extra, one-time money.
No, not on an ongoing basis, but there is a minimum balance that we should maintain in capital reserves.
Okay, so just we use that balance as a...
Yeah, the reason for this recommendation is to allow the dollars to go into an orderly planning process through the CIP.
Okay.
As opposed to trying to do it on the fly.
Okay. Okay, so you're just always looking at what's in the CIP. Okay, but there's no certain percentage like we do for the unassigned fund balance. Okay.
That's right.
And then I guess this is back to you, Wyatt. Was there any of the unfunded priorities? I mean, I guess we would it seems to me that we would look more at one-time expenses versus the recurring, since these are one-time, you know. Is there anything on, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but of those things that we weren't being able to fund, is there anything that rises to the top, or do you want to let us know if there's anything? You know, I mean, I know that would cut into what we put into capital reserves, but I wasn't sure if there was anything that you felt like, maybe we should give a second look to.
So, one thing, your adopted policies do call for any kind of year-end money to go to one-time expenditures and not
Right,
to
recurring.
avoid having to go to recurring. So I am acknowledging the fact that the city council approved a very full and ambitious budget, I think, last May. So city staff have a very full work plan to execute. And so what I would like us to try to, as an organization, to stay focused on is delivering what we've already promised in the budget. And I'm a little bit concerned if there were new initiatives, even if they're funded, about our capacity to execute on them.
Okay.
And that's why we've not gone deeper into the list of unfunded items.
Okay, so you feel comfortable?
Yes.
With it, okay. And then I'm almost done. And I don't know, I guess this is for you, you do feel with, you know, all the conversations we've had about people hurting financially, and I know that Jody said that there have been more people wanting to be put on payment plans for their car taxes and that sort of thing. Do you feel that the emergency financial assistance at $20,000, that number is sufficient?
I can't say that for sure.
Okay.
Based on the data that we have right now, which is premature.
Right.
We think it's a reasonable request. I think it's quite possible we would come back to council in January with further information and possibly a further request.
Okay.
And that's just additional emergency financial assistance. We already budgeted.
Right, that's right, that's
So
right.
that's not just 20,000.
Right.
50,000 total?
It's
maybe?
25,000.
Brings the total to 45.
45.
Yes, it was 25,000, so we'll have
Right.
45,000.
Okay.
For Q1, we used 10.
So that's significantly more than we've
Right.
done historically,
Right.
with the exception of the sort of at the height of the pandemic when we were using
Right.
ARPA money.
No, that's a good point, Ms. Hiscock. I mean, maybe we might want to just change, you know, and I knew that, but I hadn't thought about, maybe we just change that to additional emergency financial assistance. So it doesn't, because if someone was reading it, they're like, oh, they're only 20,000, you know, and I'm glad that you reminded me of that, because now I do, of course, remember that we had done that. And then I brought this up last time, and it was sort of serious, but, you know, for the council to think about, you know, I really do, you know, I was being serious about thinking, you know, during door knocking, I continue to get this, you know, I don't know what's going on in the city, that sort of thing. And so, you know, given that we do have some one-time funding left over, you know, and we don't have to decide tonight, but maybe people could think about, you know, the feasibility of maybe just one time a month, we run a half-page ad in the news press to say, this is what's on the docket, this is what's coming up, just to get people like aware of what's coming up. This is what's coming up on, you know, in this month in city council news. You know, I think that would be about $12,000 for the year. I think a half-page ad is $1,000. So just as something to think about, but that's it for me. Thank you.
On that point, I did inquire about what is our mix of marketing. And so at least from OCOM, my understanding is that they have planned the same number of print ads upcoming as the previous year. So it's not like we've cut back in any way, even without their home distribution. So the city has not reduced, I guess, advertising in the news press.
Yeah, so the OCOM has a cadence of one full-page ad a month at a cost of $1,600 per full-page ad. So it's a $20,000 budget allocation for ads in the local newspaper. And that is mixed, and that is part of OCOM's plan. So this proposal, I'd sort of, if the council would like us to look at that over the course of this week, if there's consensus for us to look at that, I could get you some more information on that. what I heard was sort of specific to the council docket. Is that,
That was, I mean, so, you know, I think looking at Falls Church Focus, which I think is a terrific newsletter, I'm not taking anything, but the majority of the information in there is city information. You know, this council information is at the very bottom, and it's a little snippet, you know, and that's fine, the majority of it is city business. So I would say more looking at what the council is, you know, what's before the council. You know, I was kind of thinking of like actually just looking at, you know, how we go over the mayor's agenda and that whole, I mean, it basically would be sort of like just cutting and pasting from that, like this is what's coming up in city council. I don't know, I just trying to throw that out there, but yeah, I appreciate that, Mayor, that we haven't cut anything back, so that's good to know too.
the only thing that just occurs to me is that sometimes the agendas change. Like, for instance, on this week's agenda, due to, we had the Tenor Hill rezonings that were on the agenda, and then at the owner's request, we pulled it off, and that occurred on Friday. Yeah. So it's just worth thinking about, is there the possibility that things could change between going to press and the actual meeting? But
I guess I would say, oh, go.
I just want to say, I would like to have a conversation with Mary Catherine about, like, you know, because maybe she might say, like, actually, where we really need funding is for X, Y, and Z. And so I would hate to have this conversation without her. I think that's number one. Number two, I mean, we were just talking about like all the DPW, I think there's like so much communications work that we need to have. So I would love to have like an overarching strategy. I'm sure Mary Catherine's been working on something. So I think the most appropriate time to have this discussion would be like in conjunction with the person who's been doing the most work on it. And also having a holistic discussion on all the other things that we need communication on too, because like
Yeah, it should be in conjunction with their budget presentation from OCOM. Like, what do they need?
Yeah.
What do they see missing for the next year's budget for
Yeah.
FY27? Your point of having it holistically.
No, I think that's a great point. So maybe just sort of a deep dive, you know, maybe table this and just do a work session deep dive with Mary Catherine. I think that's a great idea.
I would very much like that.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm comfortable. If OCOM is comfortable with what they've been doing, it seems like, you know, they've had a strategy in terms of what placements they've made. You know, we do the notices, right, separate and apart from like the advertisements, which have the function of letting, you know, the public know what's coming up. And we have residents, you know, who show up to the monthly office hours based on like what they see on those, you know, back page notice of public hearings. And so I'm comfortable with what we're doing, and in light of, you know, the many different demands on the budget, I'm comfortable with the list as is, more so than adding additional items to it.
Sorry again. I think there are also like maybe ways for like Mary Catherine to like target apartment buildings and like actually work with some of the the managers at some of these buildings. And so, yeah, I would really love to have like some sort of comprehensive plan. And so have that discussion with Mary Catherine and then figure out like, this is how we want to target everything. This is where we're seeing like a lot of bang for our buck, whatever else.
What I don't have a great sense of is what is our channel distribution, what's the mix, and what's the actual reach and effectiveness, right? So how many people, like if half of our housing stock is multifamily buildings, are we actually reaching them with any of the channels that we're using? I don't know, right? So I think that broader discussion is important.
And she, you know, the great thing about digital is you get these metrics. So she knows now the difference between a yard sign, what the impact is, versus an ad in the news press, versus a sponsored social media prompt that, you know, gets it right to the top of your feed. She now has metrics on at least how people respond to those when they access, you know, where are they coming from. So about 3 weeks ago, after the GovOps meeting, I emailed out to the City Council Mary Catherine's PowerPoint on kind of what her strategic plan is. And it's one thing to get the PowerPoint, it's another thing to have the discussion, and so we could schedule time to do that.
Well, and I think because also, I think we would also, in terms of money, you know, if
Yeah.
it's also something that I need, hey, I could use another part-time person to do that, you know, that's where we can come in and maybe help out, maybe.
While we're all talking about communications things, one of the things that I keep hearing from people is, like, they want things in the mail. Some people want old school newsletters. And that would have great reach to every single address in the city. So as and we can think about that with our personal property tax bills or our actual property bills or any of those things, or doing an actual newsletter. But again, I just want to say that because everyone else is talking about communications. I wanted to get my thing in there while I could. But as far as the budget amendments go, I'm okay with all of them. My one question is, can you just do a quick review on the Founders Row theater tax rebates? I know that was part of the voluntary concessions and the agreement we had with Founders Row, but I see $12,000 in there. That's for the 4 months that it's been opened?
1 month actually in
Oh, okay, 1
fiscal
month.
year 2025. They opened in June,
Oh, right,
mid-June.
okay.
Yes, so it is for that period alone. Yeah.
Okay, and what did we estimate we would be paying?
And actually, we didn't make any estimates for fiscal year 2025. That's why we are coming now to you guys, because we didn't expect it to come, well, at least that incentive part for fiscal year 2025.
Okay.
But back when we
Yeah.
negotiated, again, I guess in 2020, the theater tax, did we have
Yeah.
a rough?
We did,
Right.
and there's also a cap to it, and there's also a provision where the city keeps the first chunk, and then they get after that chunk, and then once they hit a ceiling, then we get after that. But in a nutshell, it is the 10% admissions tax, and it is the meals tax for just meals in the theater, not meals anywhere else in Founders Row.
So they didn't hit any cap in that first month, or?
No.
So actually, everything is prorated, the caps and the base that we keep, it's prorated based on the number of days that they're open during the fiscal year. So
Okay.
those were kind of smallish, and they exceeded those, the base.
Okay.
But they didn't hit the cap either.
So there's excess revenue that came in also from them that we didn't expect?
Yes, for this,
That
well,
covers
it's
the-
kind of hard to like divvy up what we did and we didn't expect because everything was kind of all in one pot. Yes, so this is the amount that we owe them because they opened for, I want to say 15 or so days in fiscal year 2025.
Okay. So do we have it budgeted then for fiscal year 26 for all 12 months?
Not
Is that
yet.
it?
No,
We
and
don't.
we don't have that estimate for that amount.
So that'll be a budget amendment?
That will
we'll
be a
have
budget
little bit
amendment
later in
when
the-
we
the fiscal year.
have a better understanding of their takings.
Okay. Well, I hope they make a lot of money. I hope we hit all the caps.
Okay. Other comments on the budget amendment?
Did you want to bring up, you mentioned?
Yeah, I was going to bring up the
Okay.
ADA one, so the $70,000, I guess. I don't know what the scale of those items are, but it feels like, again, you presented to us critical things in our buildings and parks that are not meeting ADA compliance, and so I would like to know what's the level of effort to get them fixed. They feel like one-time expenditures?
So we can prepare if there is consensus to do that, we will prepare the documents that way and add to the staff report specifically what that is, so that everyone understands that. And we will go forward to correct those deficiencies as quickly as we can.
I think that's a great idea.
There did seem to be like punch list item sort of things that we could.
Signs,
Yeah,
you need a grab bar
exactly.
or something, yeah.
But yeah, I would fully agree with, seeing what $75,000, $100,000 would do in terms of, prioritizing things that may be achievable short-term,
Yeah, it seems like it would have to be small things, but I would be curious to know, like, would this take away DPW time from working on other projects? Or would this set back other things if we do work on this? Because I would imagine that there would have to be some staff time. And so I would want to know what the trade-offs are if we did move forward with something like that.
So it's in our building facilities team, and so if your question is, will it compete with transportation projects, I think the answer is no.
Even for, so all the park stuff and everything like that would be
Yeah.
under facilities?
Let's get the list in front of us, and we can
Okay.
assess those impacts. But it sounds to me manageable.
So out of the 16 million, what I proposed was the buildings and the parks. I think that added up to about 80,000 or so.
Yeah.
I don't think we can get to anything beyond that, so. Okay. Anything else on budget amendment?
Let me just ask one quick question. The Vietnamese Community Outreach, what does that person do? Just for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Late this afternoon, Mr. Shields sent out the 3-month status project report to you all, but I know it was late notice, so it's a great question. This person has been working with all of our city departments to talk about the programs and how they interface with the Vietnamese community, with a primary focus on the Winter Hill senior community and the Eden Center business tenants. And so there's a variety of examples of what they've been working on. He's worked with the treasurer's office to translate the tax programs and bills. He's found, for example, Lay found that a lot of seniors at Winter Hill don't know that they're eligible for some tax relief, which would help them meet their monthly incomes by paying less on car tax. He's worked with NVTC to do the pop-up on the BRT in Vision 7 this past Sunday at Eden Center, translating the documents and spreading the information to the businesses. He worked with the Vietnamese Heritage Day, with 2 of the food vendors, to get them through the health department permit process, because that was really overwhelming. And last year there weren't any, and so we had 2 this year because he could take the English and translate it and help them fill it out. So there's some examples like that. He's worked with the library on some program translations. Housing and Human Services, he's been working to make sure the residents at Winter Hill know how to access a lot of the services and programs that they didn't know. Some of the fun and exciting stuff I'm excited with is the seniors at Winter Hill never knew about the services they could access at the senior center, and that they could have free transportation to get there. So this weekend, they're going on their first fall field trip. In fact, they had several go on the waiting list because they filled up Tracy's bus. They're coming to bingo, interacting on dance and other language programs. One of the seniors there is a retired French teacher from when he lived in Vietnam and didn't know there's a French club at the community center. So like that one just touches my heart. Sorry for, I had to share that one. So there's positive community connections like that, and then a lot of work with the businesses, and we're doing public safety training at the Eden Center with the police and emergency management. He's translating the emergency preparedness brochure that we put out, and then taking it to the businesses and helping them understand. So it's not just translating the document, it's connecting on what is the city program and bridging it over to the Vietnamese community.
Thanks very much.
A lot in 3 months and 10 hours a week, I have to say. Lay is incredibly productive.
Great initiative.
So the funding in here covers through
June 30th.
June 30th.
Current year money only takes us through December, so this would finish out the year. The memo that Mr. Shields sent out talks about some of the ongoing things that he started, but he can't finish, like Eden Center and VLAC participating in the Memorial Day Parade, and some of the stuff's where you're planning now, but it won't be finished till the second half of the fiscal year.
I just had 2 other quick things. One, I had flagged in an email, which was just that if the 250 committee or Holly can provide us with a little bit more information as sort of the expected expenditures for the $50,000, like, I know it's not a lot, but at the same time, I just want to make sure that it's well spent, like that we've thought out what the overall budget is programmatically, what the needs are versus like just like the excess stuff, you know.
I agree with that, because if you look at,
Right.
tax relief, emergency financial
Yeah.
assistance, and we're at 45,000, we're spending more than 250th than we are
Yeah.
in a year that could be really tough. it would be good to know what it is and how it's funded.
I'm glad to give you a summary of what is estimated to be in that 50,000. This is not totally finalized by the Falls Church 250 Task Force. They've had their initial brainstorming, and then we work with staff to kind of frame it up just because of the timing of your budget amendment. They're working on some living history legacy recordings that would be part of the local history at the library. Some display banners to flag and celebrate the 250, some special reenactments, something like reenacting Thaddeus Lowe's balloon and the reconnaissance that happened at Fort Taylor, some monthly program enhancements, working with all our community nonprofits that are already doing programs but emphasizing the 250. They've adopted a vision and mission. And so the thought is that they could do a brochure that talks about that, but also replicate and maybe print the 8 panels of our history panel there at the Transit Plaza and have it as a handout for those that don't just drive by there. And then the biggest part of that expense actually would be a planned birthday party in July to celebrate the independence and the 250 and the Constitution reading, tying it from the Falls Church where the readings happened on the steps to then maybe something back at the football field with music and a celebration, a birthday party, and some kind of light show. We're trying to figure that out. And so that's probably the largest expense, is trying to pull off a community event celebrating the 250th. All of that is just some preliminary numbers that the task force has been working on, and then staff tried to put some numbers behind that. And Mr. Snyder, if there's anything you want to add, because I know you've been participating in the task force, listening to the brainstorming.
Yeah, just, so the 50,000 should be viewed more as a placeholder than anything else. For me, the focus for our anniversary is going to be how people are feeling about the events of today and how that relates to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and how you record that and maintain that for posterity. So I think there's some money needed for that, but it's a preliminary thing at this point, and there's no desire to spend more than absolutely necessary. So I think we can be reporting back to City Council, I think, as it becomes more firm, if that would be desirable. But for me, the most fundamental thing is recording the understanding today of our various citizens, and we want to record that and maintain it for the future.
Just wanted to flag something quickly. I know that we're working with the Levine School of Music to do certain like programming, and so anyway, if it hasn't been brought up, the 250 celebration would be a great place for them to partner with us.
Thank you. Concur.
Sorry, go ahead.
You have
Wyatt.
one more.
Yeah, my last one was just on the 106. I see it went up from the 80 because of the asbestos, kind of costs, which makes sense, and they're just things we have to do. But does this 106 then also encompass whatever sort of like remediation of sorts is needed just to have those like plots in some sustainable like fashion for the neighborhoods? Okay, so you don't need, like, you don't anticipate more that we need beyond sort of this, or should we anticipate
Well, this is
anything
just
more?
for demolition. And in our discussions with the neighbors, we've said, in the future, there'll be a planning effort about, how the Cavalier Trail would go, and so there'd be some more expenditures at that point. But what the neighbors were interested in was simple grass, maybe kind of a pollinator, let the grass grow and have it be sort of a meadow situation. And so that's what we're going towards. As long as it complies with the city's mow ordinance, cite ourselves.
Requested that mowing when the house next door was in full wildflower bloom, so.
Yeah. I did. So one thing that we left out of the list has no sort of net fiscal impact, but at Virginia Village, the property at 208 Gibson was transferred to the EDA several years ago. We never transferred the accumulated rent from 208 Gibson, which is $60,000, to the EDA for the maintenance of all the properties. That's how all the accumulated rent is being used for, and potentially for the acquisition strike fund as well. Those are the two uses that rent money would go for. So we would ask for a $60,000 transfer of 208 rent proceeds to go to the EDA. And it has no impact to fund balance because we've already we don't include that in our fund balance or our capital reserve calculations.
Is that in addition to the MOU that we're going to talk about in November with them, of how much we allocate to them?
So the MOU will cover the rules by which they own the property and what the property can be used for, and it will lay out standards for using rent proceeds to maintain the property at high standards, and other things like that.
But because we asked them to keep their, I don't know, $980,000 or whatever into the project and not pull it out, we had committed that we would give you X dollars per year is the $60,000, I guess, on top of that is my question.
Well, the $60,000 really is not, it has to be there to service the property. So it's not really a gift to the EDA, it's just following the property. As a separate issue, there is the concept in the MOU that the EDA would earn a return on equity for their remaining $400,000 and odd that remains in the project, and that's essentially CPI plus 1% is what's been discussed, and so that's going to be before the City Council on November 17th, but that's the basic idea. So I think this is kind of separate from that. This is I don't think it should be viewed as in addition to that.
Yeah, this funding is rental income from the tenants. That's to maintain the property management and the condition of the buildings.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Melissa.
So we will have $75K for ADA parks and buildings, high priority items, and I think that's the only change.
Plus the 208 Gibson thing you just mentioned.
And the 208 thing, that's right. Okay, so we'll shift then to the Arlington County Fire Agreement. And I'll lead by noting that the Arlington County Board on Saturday did authorize the county manager to execute this fire agreement. And where did Melissa go? Because she's crucial to this whole discussion. I'll just say generally, Melissa is just great at sort of following all of these agreements and making sure that we're executing them properly and that we're getting paid properly or we're getting billed properly. So big thank you to Melissa for her attention to all these details. So we'll cover the fire and emergency medical services contract, and then following after that, we'll have the judicial services and public safety contract. So fire first, there's a very long-standing relationship between the City of Falls Church, Arlington County, and the Falls Church Volunteer Fire Department to provide fire suppression services and emergency medical response in the city. The current agreement that we have is dated from July 2014. This revised agreement was discussed at work session, and there's just a few updates since that work session. Sort of the big picture for this agreement is that the city splits the professional staff that are at Station 6, we split that 50-50. And then for everything else, we have a basic structure of we pay for CapEx at capital expenditures at Station 6, including the apparatus, and the county pays for the operating expenses for the station. So, you know, all the equipment that they use on a day-to-day basis at the station, they pay for. They fuel and maintain the apparatus. They operate the apparatus after we've covered the capital expenditures. So that's sort of the big elevator pitch on how this arrangement is struck. So some of the changes that we've already discussed, just to remind everybody, the staffing level increased about 3 years ago from 33 to 39. So we'll now, and in the budget you've already adopted, we're picking up that additional 6 positions and covering half of those costs as we have in the past. A new provision is to, in FY27, to have an increase in the overtime costs. Currently, they're capped at 7% of total salary. That cap is going to increase to 10%. I think that was, I think, an important point of negotiation for them. For apparatus, the basic structure remains the same, in which the city pays for all the apparatus. One thing that's different, however, is that the volunteers would like to get out of the arrangement where they were paying the city for the cost of the ambulance, for the medic unit, and then getting the old apparatus when it came off of line. They'd like to step away from that, no longer pay for the medic, and also not get the old equipment as we go forward. They will finance their ambulance on their own. I think I'm describing that correctly. So the net effect of that, however, is that we'll be paying more because we'll be picking up the annual cost for the ambulance. The other things that are in the agreement were just tried to clarify. There were a few little hanging issues as to who maintains what. For instance, the volunteer space, they are going to have the county do maintenance in the volunteer space, like the party room that they have, the offices, and the county will bill the city for that because under our even older lease agreement, we are financially responsible for maintaining the volunteer space. That's a commitment that predates even the 2014 agreement. I think those are some of the highlights. One other thing, just to be aware of ambulance fees. This is unchanged since the work session. We will keep $295,000 of ambulance fees, but if it grows above that, the county will get in excess of that. However, that $295,000 will increase by CPI each year. That was something that the council asked for at work session, and that is now in the agreement. Melissa, did I leave anything important out?
I don't think so.
Okay. So the request is at your next meeting for authorization for me to execute and implement this agreement. The fiscal impact does sum up the $657,000 increase. It was about $3 million, so now it's about $3.7 million per year, and that was built into the FY26 budget.
Okay, questions on the fire agreement?
So then shifting to the judicial services and public safety, and the city attorney took the lead in drafting this staff report, and we'll let the city attorney walk us through this one. And the finances on this one are kind of more complex. There's a lot more components to it, and Melissa can help answer any questions about the finances of this part of the agreement as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Wyatt. I want to give credit to Maria Rojas, who did a great deal of the lift on getting the staff report prepared, and I will walk you through it a little bit. There's a ton of services that come under the Judicial and Public Safety Services Agreement, and they are kind of numbered for you in a table on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report. What's before you tonight would be a discussion of the contract, which will be back before you for action on October 27th. The contract we're asking, it's already in force. It's been in place since July 10 of 2024. So we're asking that it be ratified by the City Council. And if the council would like to take a different direction, then we can discuss that. And there's some options laid out in the staff report for how the council could do that. So this, if you did ratify it, it would, this particular phase of the agreement that we're in would expire in July of 2029. The services under this agreement cover the circuit court, the general district court, the juvenile and domestic relations district court, the office of the magistrate, juvenile services, which includes Argus House for boys, girls outreach, a detention diversion program, the Aurora House, which is a home for girls, the Commonwealth's Attorney Services, community corrections, emergency communications, 911 dispatch, a radio system for emergency communications that's not 911 dispatch, alcohol safety action program, and the administrative overhead and capital fee that we give to Arlington County for the technology and investments that support these programs. There's some data here that on pages like 5, 6, 7, 8 that go through kind of how the costs are allocated among the two jurisdictions, and most of the services the city pays a proportionate share based on population, but there are a few services where we track usage and we pay by usage. So we are happy to take any questions or comments you might have since we're coming back to you with this for action. If you'd like more detail or clarification, we can take those comments tonight and come back with that later. Thank you.
Okay. It was helpful to see the ones that where we pay population share versus where we pay the day rate. It was interesting to know the difference. I think I noticed there was a jump in the youth home detention one. And obviously in these small sample sizes, like a couple of kids probably changes it a lot. But I know it was Argus House and the youth home detention one had big jumps. So I don't know if it's a trend or something that we're concerned about, but those were the two I noticed, I think, that had big jumps in FY 25 or 26.
To understand if it was a trend, we'd have to probably pull back, get some older data for you in the next report.
And you're right, like one kid can make a difference. So it does really spike. And I haven't seen a trend. I've not noticed a trend particularly. It does, once in a while, we'll get a huge bill, and then the next year we won't get any. And we might get credits. So it's, yeah.
Conversely, the
Kinda random.
alcohol education went from 24 to 25, $15,000 to $297. So maybe that's a positive trend. We'll go with that.
Questions on this one for Sally or Melissa? I actually had one thing going back to the fire services agreement because I just did the math. That's a 20% jump from FY 25 to 26. And we expect in FY 27 to go up because of the overtime and cap goes from 7% to 10%. So what's our sense? Is it going to go up another 20%? Like, I'm asking you to do a little.
Share of the increase is because of that step up from 33 to 39.
The salary base.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going to accelerate.
I hear from Arlington that though that they are negotiating their labor contracts. And so they're up on their 3-year cycle. So I would not expect that cost to be very stable. So.
So, yeah, let me follow up on the fire services agreement for that. Yeah, because a 20% increase caught my attention as well. Do we have a sense that after all these moving parts, that it really is a 50-50 split?
So, in terms of the overall costs, to get like all of the things the county puts in to operate, I don't have all those numbers. think it's close to 50-50 split, but I also think it's quite possible we're paying, a little bit more than 50% once all the CapEx is included. I do think there's value to the city in having that capital, having that equity position in this agreement. This isn't just a pure contract for services, but we in fact have an equity stake. And I think that's been helpful to the city in kind of maintaining a healthy relationship with Arlington County on this critical life safety service. So I think there's some virtues to having that equity stake, even if there's a bit of a price tag.
When you mean equity stake in what?
By owning the station.
Right, and the apparatus, right. And basically, we own, in simplistic terms, we own the station and the apparatus, and the county pays for maintenance, and then we split 50-50 the personnel costs. Okay, thanks.
Can I ask, on Letty's point, on the other service contracts for Argus House at 209, can you just check on those numbers? Because it's odd that it's not that it was a spike, it's that the number of childcare days came down, but then the cost is high, even though then, see, like.
One of the nature or one of the components of the agreement is there's actually, we pay an estimated amount for a fiscal year, and then 2 years later, if based on the actual usage, we might pay extra, or if we paid too much, then we'll get a credit. So sometimes if you compare the cost, the city cost there actually refers to what we budgeted for that year, which includes the true up from 2 years prior. So that's the budgetary impact. So even when we see an increase of 160 days in childcare days in 2025, we might have overpaid for fiscal year 2025 or 2023, and so we're seeing that impact in that city cost for FY 2025.
Oh, okay, so
if that makes
so
sense.
the credit is being applied to fiscal year
Correct.
2025, so it's looking artificially low.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
okay.
some of our, and some of the agreement also, when we say childcare days, we're taking the average of the previous 2 years of childcare, and that's how we estimate it. So for, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was fine. It just, looking at it, it didn't make
Yes,
sense as a per
understood,
diem cost.
yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Overall, I think it's really interesting to see this. Maybe I've looked at it before, I just don't remember what all is included in this agreement, how it's broken down, what the balance of where we spend most of our money is in this agreement. I think it's super helpful. Thank you.
The remaining items are consent, and so we're asking for a purchase order authorization for our contract with American Disposal Services, and that's to be able to execute the solid waste plan and the changes that the council adopted in September. I will note that the contract authorization amount, we believe we'll need pretty close to that full amount this year. We won't need that full amount in the future years, but having that contract authorization is governed ultimately by the city's appropriation. And so I think in the out years, we'll be below that larger number that we're asking for. The Randstad temporary staffing, this is to allow us to exceed $100,000, and Randstad is helping us with a couple of positions, including the Vietnamese outreach specialist position that we discussed earlier, and also a position helping us with the administration of our pension fund. And then the last one is authorization for me to execute our annual agreement with the Friends of the Homeless Shelter for the operation of the homeless shelter for the coming year.
Questions on this? I noted on the homeless shelter that we served 24 people but turned away 87. That was in the staff report, so.
Can we also, unrelated to this, well, I do have one question, which is that, is there a new executive director of the homeless shelter at this point? Do we have any update? There is a new person?
Thought there was. Or there's someone on the board that's a local, who is a parent. I assume there was one.
Okay, well, it might be good for us
Google
to
it and
know
see whether-
generally.
I know Dana knows,
Okay.
but I apologize, I don't know the director's name.
Okay, and then the other thing I had noticed in the city code that I just thought was interesting, and as we kind of move forward with the Gordon Road, sort of Gordon Triangle conversations and thinking about sort of unhoused population, is that it seemed as though we have like a bed cap in our city code for the number of sort of transient beds in the city. And so it might just be worthwhile to have that in mind as we move forward and thinking about, is that gonna, unnecessarily hinder longer-term costs?
Yeah,
Longer-term planning, I mean.
It's an excellent point. This agreement sort of is also governed by the city's land use actions that were approved back in, I think, in 2000 or 2001. And so they all kind of operate together.
Am I hearing an interest in changing the bed cap or exploration of that idea as by ordinance?
No, I mean, I think their capacity is like, I think they have a physical capacity at this
Right,
point,
okay.
but just for going forward and thinking about, as the Housing Commission undertakes sort of the housing needs in the city, and we think longer-term planning about, what happens to the homeless shelter if there's, redevelopment in that area, or if it's moved, to a new location, it would make sense to kind of, I think, take up whatever code provision is operating as a cap on the number of beds we're able to supply in the city. One, sorry, it came to mind as I was, when we moved to this one. Can you just check with the manager in Arlington on, I think in the last budget cycle, it came up, maybe there was a request from the Public Defender's Office. I know we paid towards the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, but they had raised like whether it made sense for jurisdictions to sort of have a supplement because of any pay disparity between the Commonwealth's Office and the Public Defender's Office, and what it meant for sort of their staffing and caseloads. And I would just be interested, and you can just, in a follow-up email, maybe even let us know, did that come up with the county manager at all this year, and how did they sort of resolve that, or was it not something that arose this year because of, it like just didn't come up in their budget or agreements? Thanks.
I know what you're speaking of, and so we can find out how that was resolved.
I got asked a question recently, and I wasn't sure if I was giving the right answer. We've been sending out notices about the organics carts. Somebody asked me if they requested a smaller organics cart this year, and then it turns out that they need a larger organics cart going forward. Would they have to pay a fee to move from the smaller cart to the larger cart?
No.
So, and it would be once a year that people could update their carts, or is it any time that they can update their carts?
I don't know the answer to that second part of the question. I'll get back with you on that, but there would not be a fee on a change to the organic.
Okay, so if people evaluate that they need a different size cart at some point, they would be able to get that changed without a fee. Great. Okay, thank you.
It would have to be annually, because we'd have to rebuild them a different annual amount.
The bill is based on the trash bin.
So the question was about the organic spend, so that doesn't affect your bill. But whether we're planning to go to like open season where you can change your cart size, or whether that's a rolling thing, I don't know the latest on that.
It's confusing that you can change your organics cart year-round, but you can only change your trash cart during open enrollment. Like that seems like,
Well,
same time, like it would be messy to say you can change one anytime you want, and the other one
Right.
only during this window.
Logistically, it makes sense. Plus, since we are buying the organics carts new, inventory will need to be managed too, with those
Secondary market where
replacements.
people can. Yeah.
Buy nothing.
Just buy nothing, everyone offers up their cart. Okay.
But that's helpful, that answers
Can
it.
we do a quick quorum check for Wednesday? Who's going to be in person? Because I think Aaron wants to be remote.
Yeah, I need to be remote. I won't be able, I'm at a
In-person quorum?
conference.
It depends on, my mom has surgery.
Okay, sounds like we'll have quorum in
I'll
person.
keep you posted.
Okay. Awesome. I'll see you all Wednesday morning then. Good night, all. Thank you
Good
for the
night.
long
Thank you,
meeting.
council.
Thank you, Ms. Ryman, for staying
Remember
so late.
9:30 Love Sculpture unveiling after the mayor's meeting.